Story 1.
My grandma gave me a penthouse for my birthday, but my mom tried to take it away to please her new husband. Hi everyone. 3 days ago, I turned 15 and my grandma gave me the most unbelievable gift. She signed over the deed to her penthouse apartment to me. She doesn't even live there full time. She has a house in the suburbs and only stays in the penthouse when she comes into the city. I was over the moon. It felt like, for the first time in a long while, something good was happening in my life. Because honestly, this last year has been absolute hell. It started when my dad walked out. He'd always been a complete workaholic, barely around, but the divorce still blindsided me. My mom never even told me directly. One day, I just noticed he was gone. Later, I found out he had already filed for divorce almost a year before. By the time I realized what was happening, it was basically over. He didn't even say goodbye to me, just left me one last message: be good. That was it. I haven't seen him since. When the divorce finalized, Mom got the house and full custody of me and my little brother. Dad technically had visitation rights, but he never used them. He just vanished from my life. Then about 2 months ago, Mom dropped another bomb. She'd been dating someone, let's call him Robert, for a few months, and now they were engaged. I barely had time to process that she was even seeing someone before she announced he'd be my stepdad. It felt rushed, forced, and honestly pretty desperate. How do you even know someone well enough in 5 months to marry them? When I finally met him, he seemed distant and cold with me. With my 4-year-old brother, though, completely different. Playful, warm, like he was auditioning for best stepdad ever. At first, I brushed it off as him just being more comfortable with little kids. But a couple of weeks later, Mom sat me down and told me the real reason behind their whirlwind engagement. Robert had been offered a new job in another state. They were moving. And here's the kicker. They planned to take my little brother, but leave me behind with my grandma. When I asked why, Mom basically admitted it was Robert's idea. He wanted my brother because he was still young enough to bond with, but me, at 15, I was too old to ever become his real daughter. Plus, apparently, I'd upset him when I said 5 months wasn't long enough to know someone before marrying them. He decided I was stuck in the past and would never accept him, and my mom agreed. She told me I'd be better off staying with Grandma, that it would be easier. I can't describe the pain I felt in that moment. My dad had already abandoned me, and now my mom was essentially choosing her new husband over me. I love my grandma dearly, and moving in with her wasn't the issue. She's the kindest, most compassionate woman I know. But to hear my own mother say I wasn't wanted, that crushed me. I told her I didn't want to wait until the move. I wanted to live with Grandma immediately. Within a few days, I'd packed my things and left. Those last couple of days at Mom's house were silent. I didn't speak to her, didn't hug her goodbye. Honestly, I didn't think she deserved it. The only person I said goodbye to was my little brother, because I knew I'd miss him like crazy. Now I'm at Grandma's, and life already feels lighter. She shows me real love, not conditional affection based on what some guy thinks. Even though the commute to school is longer, I don't care. It's worth it. Every night I call my brother to talk before bed. It hurts that I can only reach him through Mom, but I do it anyway, for him. For the first time in months, I feel like I might actually be okay. I don't really talk to my mom anymore. We only speak when it's absolutely necessary. 3 days ago, I had my birthday, but honestly, it wasn't me who organized anything. My grandma secretly put everything together. She found a couple of my close school friends through my Facebook, invited them along with some relatives, and surprised me with a little party at her house. I hadn't expected anything, so it lifted my spirits a bit, especially after how down I'd been ever since Mom sent me to live with Grandma. But after we cut the cake, Grandma announced her gift to me, and I was completely stunned. She told everyone that for now, her lawyer would act as trustee of her apartment, but the moment I turn 18, full ownership will pass to me. It was the best news I'd gotten in ages. I didn't even think of telling it to my mom. Turns out, someone else did. Yesterday, I found out that one of the party guests must have told her. That evening, Mom called me, sounding way too cheerful for someone about to drop a bomb. She said she knew about Grandma's gift, and that after talking with Robert, her husband, they decided he wanted to adopt me. Story 2.
Many years ago, my wife's grandfather found an unusual bag of seeds in the Ozark Mountains of Missouri. The discovery was made near Roaring River Park in the southwestern part of the state. The bag was lying on top of a hill and looked remarkably well preserved. Although it had likely been exposed to the elements for a long time, there were no visible signs of damage or stains. The material proved to be strong and flexible. When at rest, the bag looked slightly wrinkled, but it could still be opened and closed. Out of caution, the find was barely touched, limited to just a few photographs. Inside, there were several hundred seeds of at least 2 different species. Such discoveries are extremely rare. Only one similar artifact is known, a bag of seeds kept at the University of Arkansas. It also contains seeds of ancient plants, ancestors of which still grow in this region today. Interestingly, both bags were found approximately 80 kilometers apart. Later, the owners contacted the university and arranged to transfer the find for research. Over time, more details about the artifact's origin came to light. In fact, the bag had been discovered back in the mid-1960s by 2 men, Jerry Weber and Andy Jewell. Andy had worked for many years as a surveyor for the railroad, farmed, and spent most of his life outdoors. After the discovery, the bag was placed in a glass jar where it remained for about 65 years. Over time, some of the information about the circumstances of the find was lost as Andy Jewell passed away in the early 2000s. Later, relatives were able to recover some details. It turned out the bag was not found simply in the open, but on a rock ledge inside a small grotto on the hillside. In the same area, Andy had found other ancient items, stone tools, and arrowheads. All of these discoveries were kept together for many years. It is likely that the find site was located in Berry County, near Roaring River Park. Andy lived in the Dry Hollow area between the towns of Cassville and Seligman, and the bag may have been found near the Washburn Prairie. Pinpointing the exact location is difficult now, as most people directly involved in the story have passed away. Gathering all the available information and the old artifacts, the family decided to show the find to experts and brought it to the University of Arkansas Museum. The bag was placed in a special storage room in the museum collection, a controlled environment where archaeological artifacts are preserved. The museum curator, Dr. Mary Suter, carefully laid out the bag, seeds, and stone tools for inspection. After the initial examination, she retrieved a scientific book about woven artifacts found in rock shelters of the Ozark Mountains. As she flipped through the pages, she came across an illustration of a bag that matched almost perfectly in weave, color, and construction with the new find. The news quickly spread among museum staff, and other specialists began arriving in the room. Many noted that such artifacts are extremely rare. Archaeologists explained that rock grottos and natural shelters were often used by the region's ancient inhabitants to store items and supplies. These are precisely the kinds of locations where organic materials, which normally decompose quickly, might sometimes survive. According to preliminary assessments, the bag belongs to the pre-contact period, the time before Europeans arrived in North America. Its exact age is still unknown, but it can be confidently stated that it is at least 500 years old and likely much older. To determine a more precise age, radiocarbon dating will be needed. Since the artifact is linked to the cultural heritage of native peoples, the museum must coordinate with the Osage tribe before conducting research. Afterward, samples can be sent to another university for laboratory analysis. For now, the bag, seeds, and other items remain at the University of Arkansas Museum, where they are being preserved under appropriate conditions and studied by archaeologists. Seed bags like this are considered exceptionally rare finds. Before this discovery, archaeologists knew of only 2 similar bags from Eden Bluff
and another heavily damaged one that contained acorns. Organic materials, such as plant fibers and seeds, usually decompose quickly, so their preservation over hundreds or even thousands of years is highly unusual. Museum specialists immediately began photographing the seeds and stone items to share with other researchers. One of the small black seeds initially puzzled the scientists, but after discussion, they concluded that all of the seeds are very old and no longer viable for germination. Along with the bag, the family also donated several stone tools and arrowheads that Andy Jewell had found. Archaeologist Jared Piard, who specializes in ancient stone implements, quickly determined that these items belong to two different archaeological periods. Some date back to the Middle Archaic period, roughly 2000 to 5000 BCE, and others are from the Woodland Culture period, spanning approximately the first millennium BCE to the first millennium AD. However, these finds can only indirectly help in dating the bag, since it's unclear which of these items were originally found with it. After the preliminary inspection, Dr. Mary Suter decided to show another similar artifact from the museum collection. She led the guests deeper into the storage area, which houses thousands of archaeological artifacts. Among the many shelves with cataloged boxes, she found a collection from excavations conducted in 1932. The box contained various ancient items, shells, bones, fragments of cords, and other objects. Among them was a bag that proved to be almost identical in weave, color, and construction with the new find. It was a little larger, but far more deteriorated. The material was heavily damaged and bound with a piece of leather. Inside, the excavation had uncovered only half of an old carved pipe. Interestingly, this bag was also found in Barry County, Missouri, just a few kilometers from the location where Andy Jewell found his find. Unfortunately, the 1932 artifact has never been radiocarbon dated, so its precise age remains unknown. Next, the researcher showed another famous specimen, the renowned Eden Bluff seed bag. It is approximately 2,000 years old, but is so well preserved that it appears almost new. Examining the museum collection, you could see a vast number of archaeological finds associated with the ancient inhabitants of the Ozarks. The storage houses ceramics, tools, jewelry, and other items that help researchers reconstruct the history of the region. After all the research, the family decided to formally donate the discovered bag to the University of Arkansas Museum. The artifact was formally handed over to the Osage tribe, considered the custodian of many cultural treasures of the region's native peoples. The museum itself is responsible for preserving and scientifically studying such artifacts. The bag was placed in a specialized storage unit with stable temperature and humidity. Under these conditions, the artifact can be preserved for decades and remain accessible for research. The family had long worried whether they could properly preserve such an ancient and valuable item. In the museum, it is now under expert supervision, ensuring not only proper storage conditions, but also continued scientific study. Researchers emphasize that archaeological artifacts are of immense importance for understanding history. That is why, when such items are found, it is recommended to leave them in place and notify specialists who can properly document and study the discovery. The story of this bag ended positively. It is now in a secure location where scientists can study it, and the find will help provide a better understanding of the lives of people who lived in this region centuries ago. In the future, radiocarbon dating of the seeds and a detailed analysis of the bag's material are planned. Once these studies are complete, more will be known about its exact age and origin.
Story 3.
I nearly lost $900,000 during my divorce, but instead, I destroyed my cheating wife in court with shocking evidence. I work as an elementary school teacher, so my daily routine is very predictable. I have fixed hours at school, and every Tuesday we usually had staff meetings that ended around 6 p.m.
That meant I normally got home by 7. My wife, Terry, whom I had been married to for over 30 years, would go to the gym every Tuesday evening. She always came back exhausted, so I usually prepared dinner while she showered and handled the house chores. But one day, my principal surprised us by canceling the meeting. It was only 3:30 p.m., and I thought it would be a great idea to head home early, cook dinner, and maybe catch up on some household tasks. Lately, I'd noticed Terry becoming more distant, and I hoped a candlelit dinner might help rekindle some spark between us. Our marriage had been strained by financial troubles, and I could feel her pulling away more and more. She wanted to control everything, and if things didn't go her way, she would become stubborn and irritable. I always thought of myself as patient, but it was starting to wear me down. When I got home, I noticed her car in the garage. That was strange, because she usually took the bus to the gym. I slipped in quietly through the back door. The first thing I saw was her purse sitting on the kitchen counter. Terry was always meticulous about where she placed her things, so this was odd. Then I noticed her workout clothes and a large towel on the floor. Just as confusion set in, I heard noises coming from upstairs. My first thought was that she might not be feeling well, so I cautiously started up the stairs. That's when I stumbled over a pair of men's shoes. Scattered on the steps were pants, a shirt, socks, and worst of all, Terry's lingerie, the kind she only wore for anniversaries or special nights. My blood ran cold. I froze on the stairs, heart pounding, stomach turning. For a moment, I thought I might faint. I sat down, trembling. Then anger began to boil inside me, an emotion I rarely allowed to take control. Years of teaching had given me patience, but this was beyond anything I could manage. I moved quietly toward the bedroom. To reach it, you had to pass through the walk-in closet. The door was cracked open just enough for me to see inside. And there it was, my wife, my partner of 3 decades, the mother of our children, betraying me in our own bed. I pulled out my phone and hit record. I knew I would need proof, not just for myself, but for the storm that was about to follow. Watching it unfold before my eyes was like living through a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Terry, the woman who claimed to love me, who volunteered at charities, who acted like the perfect wife, was now just another liar. I couldn't watch anymore. I stopped recording, slipped out of the house, and just walked aimlessly. Eventually, I ended up in a park miles away. I sat on a bench, splashed some water on my face, and played the video back. The sound was low, so nearby kids wouldn't hear, but on that screen was the collapse of my marriage, my family, my entire life. And there in the park, I broke down and cried. By the time I got back home, it was around 7 p.m., my usual return time on meeting days. Terry greeted me at the back door with fake concern. "Do you want me to get you something to drink?" Her eyes were full of feigned worry, but I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth. My voice shook as I muttered, "Not really. I think it's just my stomach. I'm going to take a shower and sleep it off." "All right, but take a bucket in case you throw up. I don't want to ruin the clean sheets," she said casually. That almost broke me. Those clean sheets had already been ruined, stained by betrayal. I replied more firmly, "I'll sleep in the guest room tonight." And that's exactly what I did. For the next few days, I pretended to be unwell. She went on with life as if nothing had happened, while I carried the weight of the recording in my pocket. The evidence that my marriage was nothing but ashes. When Monday came, I finally decided what to do next. I needed answers. Was this just a one-time betrayal, or had it been going on for a while? The next morning, I told the principal that I had to undergo an unexpected medical procedure and wouldn't be able to teach for a few days. A substitute was arranged, which gave me the freedom I needed. On Tuesday, I left home as usual, but parked several streets away, then walked back quietly, cutting through neighbors' yards. I knew all the back routes and moved carefully so no one would notice me. I slipped into our detached garage and changed into casual clothes and soft shoes to keep silent. Then came the waiting. I remembered that the last time I'd come home early, there hadn't been any strange cars parked outside. That meant her lover probably came on foot. I crouched behind the hedge and bushes near our front entrance, hidden but with a clear view of the door. Terry carried on her morning as if everything was normal. Washing dishes, starting the dishwasher, vacuuming, dusting. Around 11:30, she went upstairs. I heard the shower running, followed by the toilet flushing. After about 45 minutes, she came back down and left the front door slightly open, an unspoken invitation for her guest. It didn't take long. Around 12:30, he showed up. I didn't know who he was at first, but I managed to capture about 10 seconds of video on my phone. It showed his side profile and almost a clear shot of his face. He didn't hesitate, he just walked straight into my house. The first words I heard froze me in place. "I hope you're wearing that workout outfit again." "Of course," Terry replied with a giggle. "You always loved when I put it on. Sometimes I think that's what hooked you in the first place." That was all I needed. Their comfort with each other screamed of a long-term affair. They headed upstairs without a care in the world. I returned to the garage, my heart pounding out of my chest. My head was spinning with questions. Who was this man? How long had this been going on? And why hadn't she ever talked to me about anything? What terrified me more was the thought of my health. They hadn't used protection, at least not that I could see. The idea that she might have put me at risk made my stomach churn. I thought back to her years at the gym, the social circle of married women she had joined, and the charity events. Maybe the gym held the answers.
Update 1. Being a teacher came with one big advantage. I had access to printers and other resources. I decided to start by printing still frames from the video I'd taken. Identifying him was now my top priority. On Thursday, when Terry was supposed to go to the gym again, I suggested going with her. I claimed I was thinking about getting a membership myself, especially since school was on break. She immediately grew uncomfortable and tried to talk me out of it. "It's really just a group of wives who chat more than work out," she insisted, but I didn't budge. So that Thursday, I walked into the gym with her. The moment I stepped inside, it felt like a scene from an old Western. Everyone turned to stare at me, whispering among themselves. Terry was visibly on edge, sneaking nervous glances toward the staff area. I tried to distract myself by walking around the facility. It was the usual setup, rows of machines, mirrors on the walls. Near the exit, I noticed a staff board with photos and contact info. At the top was the owner and director, Miss Elizabeth West, followed by 2 women and 1 man. My blood went cold. The man was him, the lover. Under his photo, Philip Barnes, head of training programs, personal coach. As I memorized his number, I looked back toward the machines. Terry was gone. Panic struck me until I spotted her a few minutes later in a hushed but desperate conversation with none other than Philip. She stood partly hidden behind weight equipment, gesturing for him to leave. Then she quickly returned to her machine as if nothing had happened. She didn't realize I'd seen it all. I sat there burning with rage, trying to keep my composure. When she came back over, she noticed my pale face and asked softly, "Are you okay? Is your blood sugar still low?" "I'm fine now. Are you ready to leave?" Before she could answer, the director's voice echoed through the loudspeaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, the last training session of the day is canceled.
Mr. Barnes suddenly felt unwell and had to go home. A wave of disappointment swept through the women in the gym. But I wasn't disappointed. For me, it only confirmed everything. Update 2. It seemed that workouts with Mr. Bonte were a cornerstone for many women at that gym. That alone made me think this needed deeper investigation. When I glanced at Terry, she didn't show much reaction to the announcement of his sudden illness. But I could swear I saw her shoulders relax, as if a huge weight had been lifted. "Let's go," she said quickly, snatching her towel and gym bag from the storage area where everyone left their things during class. We were just stepping out when a woman approached us, someone I didn't immediately recognize. "Hello," she said nervously. "Sorry, I'm new to all this and lost track of time. My son Timothy's here, right?" That wasn't usual. New parents often struggled with pickup procedures. I reassured her I'd get Timothy while colleagues covered the remaining kids. I found him near his classroom, chatting with another student. "Hey Tim, your mom's here. Let's head to the pickup area." He looked puzzled. He was in the last year of elementary school, old enough to not lose track of time. "That's weird," he muttered. "Mom's usually busy with her fitness instructor on Friday afternoons. Back at my old school, she often didn't come until 5:30. The word fitness instructor hit me like a hammer. My heart pounded as I casually asked, "Oh, that's great she takes care of her health. Do you happen to know his name?" "Yeah, it's Bonte or something like that. He works at the local gym but also does private lessons at home. That's who I want to be when I grow up. Mom always seems so happy and relaxed after training with him. We usually order takeout on Fridays because she doesn't have time to cook." I nearly lost my composure. This man wasn't just entangled with my wife, he was messing around with multiple women in town. Back at the car, his mother thanked me warmly for helping. "Not a problem," I said smoothly, "part of the job. By the way, I don't think we've officially met. I'm Gerard D. Kids just call me Mr. D." "Nice to meet you," she replied, shaking my hand. "I'm Mary Jones. I remember seeing you at the gym last Thursday. You were there with your wife, Terry. Sorry she seemed in such a hurry to leave. It looked like Mr. Bonte's absence threw everything off." The moment she said his name, her entire demeanor shifted. She paled, her hands trembled, and she stammered, Well, Mr. D, see you later," before practically fleeing the parking lot. That sealed it. Bonte wasn't just a trainer. He was a serial predator in our community.
Update 3. It was time to think about my future, and in that vision there was no Terry. Rage gave me clarity. I began reviewing all the small but crucial details of our shared life, the sort of things couples often overlook. Who pays which bills? Which insurance company do we use? When are utilities due? From which account do we make automatic payments? I discovered the mortgage had only a small balance left. My retirement account had grown to an impressive $900,000, thanks to mandatory contributions from our teachers' union. Our savings account, intended for an overseas vacation, held about $30,000. That trip was no longer on the table. My priority became draining it before Terry realized I knew about her betrayal. Quietly, I engineered a series of appliance breakdowns while she wasn't home. I'd unplug a cord, then claim a repairman had come to fix it, paying in cash. In reality, I pocketed the money and repaired it myself. Over time, I gathered nearly $20,000 this way. I also purchased tools and other necessities to prepare for what was coming. Update 4. I always paid cash for everything, showing the receipts to Terry, then secretly returning the items the next day. Dishonest? Absolutely. But honesty and trust had already been gutted from our marriage. Because of her actions, I was becoming a man I never thought I could be, a liar. Her Thursday daytime workouts with Bonte continued, and I no longer bothered even trying to initiate anything intimate with her. We coexisted like roommates. That was it. Quietly, I began boxing up my personal belongings, keeping them stored in the garage where Terry rarely went. Since her car usually sat outside,
The garage was basically my territory, and she didn't notice my gradual disappearance. On the rare occasion she did ask about missing items, I told her they'd broken or that I didn't need them anymore. She accepted those answers mostly because many of my things didn't fit her preferred aesthetic anyway. When most of my possessions were gone and the house looked practically unchanged, I realized how much I'd already surrendered to Terry's control over the years. I withdrew what I could from my retirement account and bought a small house on the edge of town. It wasn't much, just 2 bedrooms, a tiny yard, and a garage, but it was mine. Close to the school where I worked, and best of all, the mortgage was small enough that half my salary easily covered the payments. No mansion, no luxury, but solid. Amazing what you can find if you're willing to skip the glossy neighborhoods. I moved my belongings in piece by piece. Furniture wasn't a problem. Secondhand shops and donation centers were full of cheap finds. Honestly, the place reflected my own state. Used, but still standing. It was time for everyone to get what they deserved. One afternoon at school pickup, Mary Jones came over to me again. Her son Timothy was playing nearby, but I immediately noticed she looked shaken, as if she had been crying. As a teacher, you get trained to read those signs. "Mr. D, can I talk to you for a minute?" she asked, her voice wavering. "Of course. Just park over there and meet me at the benches." I always joked that those benches near the pickup zone were my office. She parked, then joined me, while Timothy kicked a ball around. She hesitated, then finally began. "I don't know how much you know about what's been happening at the gym." I kept my face steady. "I know Terry, my wife, enjoys it there. Says it keeps her in shape." She bit her lip, clearly wrestling with herself, then blurted, "There are things you need to know." I cut to the chase. "Does this have to do with Philip Bonte?" Her expression hardened instantly. "You have no idea just how much it has to do with that pig." "I can imagine. But go on." Tears welled in her eyes. "He targets women at the gym. Regulars. He watches, waits, and then pounces." I asked how she knew. She looked away, ashamed. "Because I was one of them. Until last month. We met every Friday at 12:30. Her voice faltered as though reliving it.
She confessed how she had believed there could be a future with him. Divorced, lonely, missing intimacy. Bonte had filled a void, until suddenly another woman replaced her. He dropped her cold, with nothing but a half-hearted, "Sorry, can't anymore." She gave a bitter laugh through tears. "I thought I was special. Turns out I was just another notch." I sat stunned. How could she unload this on me, her child's teacher? She must have been truly desperate. Trying to offer some comfort, I murmured, "Relationships aren't always what they seem." Her eyes narrowed, searching my face. Then she whispered, "You already know, don't you? About him and Terry?" I swallowed hard. "Yes, I know." Mary reached for my arm. "Then please believe me, he'll keep doing this until someone stops him. He doesn't care who he hurts as long as his ego's fed. He even brags about it at bars with his buddies." Her tone sharpened. "If you need my help to make him pay, just say the word. That man deserves to be brought down." She called for Timothy and drove off, leaving me in silence. I sat there, mind racing. Oddly, I felt a flicker of relief. Her confession made my plan for revenge seem less like an act of a betrayed husband and more like a moral obligation. Bonte wasn't just wrecking my life. He was a predator preying on countless women. The question now was, how many more? I started piecing together his schedule. The gym was open every day except Mondays, and he seemed to be there constantly. Using the number listed at the gym, I tracked down his address. Just 3 blocks from our house. No wonder it was so easy for him to sneak over for sessions with my wife. I told Terry that my doctor had recommended daily evening walks around 5 p.m. Luckily, she showed no interest in joining me. That gave me the perfect cover. Since I knew it wouldn't interfere with her own meetings, everything went smoothly. During my first evening walk, I headed straight to Bonte's address and discovered that he lived in a ground-floor apartment among several similar buildings. His car wasn't there, so I lingered nearby to catch his return. He usually left our house well before 6 p.m., which meant he almost always came back around that time. Sure enough, at exactly 6 p.m., he walked into his apartment. It became a routine, day after day, whenever I was free to go out. On days I had staff meetings and couldn't leave, I assumed he still followed the same pattern. I began to suspect that his evenings at the gym weren't really about exercise, but about meeting different women. To confirm this, I adjusted my schedule, starting my walks earlier and watching his daily movements more closely. Eventually, I decided to take a full week off from work just to investigate. I went to an electronics store and purchased surveillance equipment, a long-range listening device, motion-triggered HD cameras with audio, and an external hard drive for storage. On Monday, after setting everything up, I installed the first camera inside Bonte's apartment. Luckily, his place was small, almost like a studio with a kitchenette and dining space. One camera was enough to cover the entire living area, except the bedroom. Breaking in was shockingly easy. He hid his keys under the doormat. Careless. All I had to do was wait for him to head to the gym, slip inside, place the camera, and leave. From then on, every sound or movement in his apartment was recorded and streamed straight to my laptop, time-stamped and secure. That same evening, I got my first footage, Bonte eating takeout in front of the TV before heading to bed at 9 p.m. The next day, I slipped into the gym through the back entrance after closing time and set up a second camera in a private room where clients were usually assessed. This was the same room Bonte often used for one-on-one sessions. By Wednesday, when Terry went out shopping, I had already installed the third and fourth cameras, one in our bedroom and another in the living room. Reviewing Tuesday's recordings shocked me, though deep down I wasn't surprised. Bonte woke up, went out for breakfast, then came back and made a phone call. "Julie, hey, it's me. He's gone. See you at 12:30. Wear what I told you. Don't worry, I'll be careful. No one will see me come over. You said he's out for 3 days? Perfect. I'll come Thursday and Friday, too. We'll talk later. Love you." He hung up with a spring in his step, practically glowing. On Thursday, I set up in the garage with my laptop, waiting. As expected, the camera caught him returning with breakfast again, then calling Terry. She answered. "Good thing my husband left for work. See you at 12:30, like always." That was the breaking point. Later, I asked Mary, Terry's mother, to help me compile a list of all the women Bonte had been involved with in the past. She attacked the task with energy, and within a week, I had names and addresses. To my horror, Terry's name was on that list too. At this point, our house meant nothing to me. It wasn't a home anymore, just a building. Terry noticed the emptiness, but I brushed it off by saying I was reorganizing my things. Meanwhile, I secretly prepared for the end. I met with a divorce attorney, set up new bank accounts and insurance under my name only, moved our vacation savings to my private account, and switched to a new SIM card. I even changed the beneficiaries of my retirement plan to our children. I gathered all the evidence, surveillance footage, phone transcripts, photographs. I placed it all in folders, along with the names and contact details of the women Bonte had been with. I even included the address of a local clinic for STD testing, since most of his affairs were unprotected. On our kitchen table, I left divorce papers, DVDs of their encounters, printed stills, and my wedding ring, cut in half and smeared with grime. Beside it was a note. "Terry, this ruined ring is what's left of our marriage. Do not contact me. If you must, do it through the attorney listed in the documents. I've requested a restraining order at the school, so do not come there. Any disturbance will result in immediate police intervention. Our children know the truth, so don't expect to rewrite the story." Then I left. In the weeks that followed, everything fell apart for them. Word of the scandal spread quickly. The gym owner was forced to shut down and leave town. Bonte was later found beaten in an alley downtown. Divorce filings surged in our area, and several houses went up for sale. Terry came home that day, found my farewell package, and fainted on the spot. A neighbor called an ambulance. She later tried to contact me, but I ignored every attempt. Eventually, she even stormed the school, which ended in her arrest. After that, her efforts stopped. Our children didn't hold back. They confronted her openly, disgusted by her betrayal. Thankfully, they had inherited stronger values from me, not her. The divorce went through, and financial matters were settled. Terry had to sell the house and move into a smaller place on the outskirts of town. By then, she was known around the community as the gym slut. Every time she went out, whispers and mocking glances followed. Shame and depression eventually pushed her into psychiatric care. As for me, I kept teaching, rebuilt my life, and now live peacefully in my new home.
Story 4. I refused to let my husband's brother move in with us, the same man who once peed on my belongings and tried to blame my cat for it. I'm 29, my husband Ted and I have been together for 10 years. We met back in college and have been inseparable ever since. I graduated earlier than him and took a semester off to travel while he finished his studies because we were planning to move to another state afterward. But Ted had to retake several classes, so when I returned, we couldn't move yet, and I didn't have my own place. I moved in with him and his roommate, who also happened to be his older brother, Ash. He's 32. Before I moved in, I made sure Ted talked to Ash about me bringing my cat. They already had an old dog, but Ash said it was fine. About 3 weeks after I moved in, I started noticing a strong smell of urine in our bedroom. We couldn't figure out where it was coming from. My cat is perfectly litter trained, so I knew it wasn't him. The dog couldn't go upstairs due to joint problems, so that wasn't possible either. Then I started finding clothes on the floor that smelled like pee. I asked Ted about it, but he said he had no clue. After 3 miserable months of this, someone was still peeing on my clothes twice a week. I asked Ash if he'd been bringing the dog upstairs, and he denied it. By that point, I was at my limit. I started keeping everything tidy, but I still found urine in my shoes, on pillows, and even decorative items. One day, after I completely broke down in tears, Ted suggested maybe my cat was marking territory, since the urine was only on my things and it was a new environment. But anyone who's ever had a cat knows that cat urine smells nothing like human urine. I knew it wasn't my cat. So I set up a hidden camera in our bedroom. I was paying rent, and Ted knew about the camera, so I figured it was the best way to find out what was really going on. And the footage showed Ash sneaking into our room and peeing on my stuff. When I saw the video, I packed my things and my cat and went to stay with a friend until Ted finished school. After that, we moved out. When the truth came out, I refused to talk to Ash. He disgusted me. Ted handled all communication with him. Since then, I've barely interacted with him. He was one of the groomsmen at our wedding, but we stay away from each other at family gatherings. During the pandemic, Ash lost his job and apartment. Now he's struggling financially and asked if he could stay with us. And honestly, I don't want him anywhere near me. The man was 25 when he did that, a fully grown adult. Now Ted's entire family is calling and texting me saying I'm heartless for leaving him homeless during a pandemic. But they weren't the ones whose clothes he peed on. I was. Maybe I'm being too harsh. Maybe I should let it go. But every time I think about it, I just can't. I know I'm right. I have every reason to not want him in my home. But even Ted is starting to say he can't just abandon his brother, especially since the job market here is better for his field. For context, Yes, Ash went to therapy after the incident. His mom made him go. That's when we learned why he did it. Apparently, Ted and Ash had always been very close, and Ash saw me as a threat who was stealing his best friend, so he thought doing something that awful would drive us apart. Instead, it only made Ted stop talking to him completely for a long time. The therapist later suggested they make amends, and Ted's mom helped them reconnect, but it was agreed that I'd never have to speak to Ash again or let him into our home. As for the wedding, it was mostly for our parents. We would have been fine with a small ceremony, but since I was the first of my sisters to get married, my family wanted something big. All my sisters were bridesmaids, and all of Ted's brothers, including Ash, were groomsmen. I didn't have to talk to him or take pictures with him, so I didn't care. Why can't another family member take him in? Because we live on the East Coast, and the rest of the family is on the West Coast. Ted's job opportunities are much better here, so moving is not an option. I'm even trying to convince his brothers, there are 8 of them, to pitch in and help Ash stay over there. Ted's family has this forget and forget mentality. They overlook things I find appalling, like stealing cars, forging degrees, and misusing money. So of course they think Ash's behavior was a one-time mistake. Did he ever apologize? Only to Ted, never to me, and that still hurts. I even considered forgiving him, but I realized it would only open the door for him to come back into my life, and I can't risk that. Did he pay for the stuff he ruined? No. I didn't even know it was him at first. I just washed my things. After I saw the footage, I threw out everything that had been soiled, except for 2 pairs of shoes I still haven't replaced. Ted, bless him, is the best man I know. When this all happened, he was shocked and completely cut off his brother. Later, after their mom and the therapist pushed him to reconcile, they made peace, but Ted never once pressured me to forgive Ash or let him in. He told me it's okay if I never want to see his brother again. And honestly, I love Ted enough to tolerate Ash's presence only when absolutely necessary, like on holidays or big family events. But that's it. I will never live under the same roof as that man again.
Update 1. Each part of this story was written at different times over the past few days. So, as many of you suggested, I showed the post to Ted. After reading the comments, he realized that he'd been wrong, not just toward me, but in how he'd let his family treat me. He apologized over and over, saying he should have done more back then, stood up for me, set boundaries, and demanded better behavior from his brother. He made it clear that Ash moving in with us was absolutely out of the question. Ted also reached out to people in his professional field to see if there were any job openings for Ash. One of his contacts happened to work at the same company where Ash had been employed, and here's what Ted found out. Ash hadn't been fired, he just left voluntarily, but his job was still open for him if he wanted to come back. Ted decided to drive over and talk to him in person while I was at work. We live a couple of hours away from Ash. For context, I work 2 jobs, one from 4 p.m. to midnight and another part-time during the day. Not because Ted can't support us, but because I actually like what I do, and it keeps me busy and happy. But when Ted got to Ash's place, he found something that triggered a chain of events and revelations that honestly left me more sad than angry. Yeah, I know, people will probably call me spineless again, say I should be furious, but I'm just so tired. I just want to sleep. Still, I feel like I owe you all closure after so many of you reached out, whether kindly or harshly. This is the shorter version of what's happened since my first post. Let's start with Ted's brothers. There are 10 of them. Brother number 1, doctor, military background, wife, 3 kids. Brother number 2, surgeon, wife, 2 dogs, a bearded dragon. Brother number 3, engineer, engaged, 1 dog. Brother number 4, teacher and researcher, wife, 1 child. Brother number 5, works in IT, married. Brother number 6, doctor, single, open to meeting someone. Brother number 7, chef or businessman, wife, 1 child. Brother number 8, car salesman, wife, 3 kids, aquarium fish. Brother number 9, accountant,
Wife, 1 cat. Brother number 10, Ash. If I say wife X, I mean the wife of that brother, not that they have multiple wives. Anyway, Ted and I talked about everything you pointed out. He apologized, we cried together, promised to be better, and decided to see therapists separately. If both our therapists recommend couples therapy later, we'll do that too. Now, back to the situation. Ted's contact confirmed that Ash hadn't actually been fired, he just left. That made Ted furious, so he went to Ash's house to confront him. Ash wasn't home, but Ted had a spare key for emergencies, so he went in and waited. At one point, he needed to use the bathroom, but the guest one was locked, so he went into Ash's room to use his. That's when he found a situation. That's how he phrased it when he called me. Ted phoned me and said I should stay home, that he'd be back later because he had to involve his family and didn't want to burden me with more chaos. My stomach dropped, but I just said, please be careful and come home soon. 2 hours later, wife number 8 called me crying, asking if I was okay. I said I was fine, but hadn't heard from Ted, except for a vague message about a situation. She asked if I wanted to know what was going on. I said yes. She started apologizing and said that none of them had known the full story. Apparently, brother number 5 read my post and called brother number 7 to complain that I'd aired family laundry online. But when your brother-in-law literally pees on someone's belongings, it's not exactly a common enough story to confuse with another family. Brother number 7 read the post and thought some details didn't add up, so he called brother number 2, who then called his mom, and by that point the entire family had read it. I'd missed a few calls from brother number 2 and brother number 6, but I was at work and didn't answer. And here's what came out next. The whole therapist story about Ash, fake. The so-called therapist was actually just a friend of his pretending to be one. No license, no education, nothing. He pretended for 3 years just to get his mom off his back. She knew. She covered for him. Said she'd forgiven worse things from the other sons. It all came out when brother number 2 asked her why Ash had never apologized to me. They all assumed he already had, and that I'd forgiven him since I have a reputation for being too soft. Plus, they thought he'd only done it a few times, not over the course of several months. Anyway, wife number 8 told me that brothers number 3, 4, and 8 were already driving to meet Ted because he'd called for help. That freaked me out. She suggested I talk to wife number 1 for emotional support. Then Ted called again, saying he was sorry and that his brothers were handling it. I told him to stop sugarcoating things and tell me what was really going on. That's when he said it. Ash has serious psychological issues. He hates me. In his bathroom, there are pictures of me covered in urine and semen. And apparently, there were photos of brother number 1's 14-year-old daughter, too. I have no idea what she ever did to deserve that. Ted said he searched Ash's bedroom and found old family photo albums that should have been with their parents. Inside, the faces of certain people, ours, were cut out, scratched, or vandalized. When he found one of our wedding photos, yellowed and soaked in urine, he dropped the album in disgust. Then he saw Ash's cat hiding under the bed, terrified and filthy. When he coaxed her out, she was covered in dried urine and semen. Ted called brother number 6, told him what he found, and said they needed to take the cat to a vet immediately. Brother number 6 told him to stay put until they figured out where Ash was. The brothers started coordinating. Brother number 1 was furious and threatened to kill Ash over the photos of his daughter. The rest were between anger and panic. Then Ted called his mom to confront her about covering for Ash. She broke down crying and admitted she'd known the brothers had bullied Ash when they were younger and that she felt guilty for never protecting him. So she tried to make it up to him by constantly defending him as an adult. Ted remembered how when we got married, his mom hovered around Ash constantly. We thought it was just her being caring, but now it all made sense. After she confessed, Ted called me again, apologized, and told me everything. I was so shaken, I called my boss and took the rest of the day off. I just couldn't function. I decided to drive to him because someone had to look after the cat. He told me not to come, said I shouldn't see what he saw, but I couldn't sit still. About an hour into the drive, I got a notification from our smart doorbell, a delivery. It was a bouquet of sunflowers, Ted's favorite flowers. I asked the delivery guy to read the card out loud. They were from Ash. The card said something like, "She set me up by airing our problems. Whatever happens next, it's her fault." I had to pull over and cry. I asked my neighbor to take the flowers, throw them away, and send Ted a photo for evidence. Then I drove to my sister's because I had no idea what else to do. I'm devastated. I loved this family. I thought they loved me back. Now I feel like I've lost them all. I'm terrified for my husband, and even for Ash, though he terrifies me. I don't know what's going to happen next. Ted's brothers eventually found Ash. There were shouting, fighting, and eventually an ER visit. Ash is now under psychiatric supervision. Ted's mother keeps trying to contact me. I don't know if it's to apologize or to get updates, but I'm done with her. Sadly, Ash's cat didn't make it. The vet discovered severe kidney damage that couldn't be treated. The clinic even called the police when brother number 4 brought the cat in, suspecting abuse. It's all such a nightmare. Ted has cut contact with about half of his family. I hope it stays that way. We're both in therapy now, trying to rebuild ourselves. I know I'll never get an apology, and maybe that's for the best. All I know is, no one from that family will ever live in my house again, under no circumstances.
Update 2. Hi everyone. I want to start by saying thank you, truly, for the overwhelming support, kindness, and love I've received from complete strangers online. Your words, messages, and compassion mean more than you can imagine. I promise I'll start replying soon. It's just, the past few days have been incredibly hard. My therapist told me to keep writing, to organize my thoughts and process what's happened. So since some of you are still following my story, I guess these posts have turned into a kind of journal for me. It's been almost 2 weeks since I opened Pandora's box, meaning since I refused to let my husband's brother move in with us. And you all know what happened after that. I'll forever be grateful to everyone who helped me see that some things need to be discussed, even if doing so turned my entire life into chaos. A lot of you asked similar questions, so I'll answer the main ones here. Right now, I barely speak to anyone except brother number 6. He's always been my favorite, the most kind-hearted and level-headed of them all. Honestly, we should have followed his example from the beginning and kept some distance from the family. He's been the most supportive through everything, and he even apologized for all the crap that went down. I talked to brother number 1 and his wife. I offered help in any way I could, but they politely declined, saying I'd already done enough. I'm not sure if that was sincere or just polite distance, but either way, I'm staying out of their orbit for now. Most of the other brothers apologized too. A few of them admitted their mistakes, both in this situation and in the past. Honestly, this family is going to keep a whole generation of therapists in business. I suggested therapy for all of them because, even though I might have been the trigger, this goes way deeper than me. Now, about my mother-in-law. Some people wrote that maybe she's been a victim of manipulation and abuse her whole life. I'm not denying or confirming that. It's not my place. What I do know is that she's had a rough life, but after everything that happened, we'll never speak to her again. She called us screaming that we destroyed her family. Her exact words to my husband were, "I worked for years to keep this family together. I forgave everyone for everything they ever did. And this is how you repay me? By letting some bitch tear us apart?" So yeah, that bridge is gone. Ted's coping the best he can.
He's in therapy too, working through his guilt and grief. He keeps apologizing even though I know none of this was his fault. He said that what his best friend and brother did to me will haunt him for a long time. We've been reading some of your comments together. He's thankful for everyone who sees him as someone trying to make amends, but he says he hasn't earned forgiveness yet. He believes it will take years to truly make things right. He even told me that he'd understand if I wanted a divorce, that he couldn't live with himself knowing what his family did to me. But I told him no, I still love him deeply, and I know he isn't responsible for what happened. We'll see how therapy goes for both of us. Where's Ash now? He's still under psychiatric supervision. He's asked to see Ted, but Ted refuses. He did send him a letter, though. I don't know what's in it, and I don't want to. Ted assured me that I'll never have to see Ash again. Once doctors deem it safe, he'll be transferred to the West Coast, where the rest of the family can deal with him. Brother number 3 is currently overseeing his condition and agrees it's best to keep him far away from us. Ted still discusses the medical updates with him, but I stay out of it, and that's perfectly fine by me. Following your advice, Ted and I took a break. I quit one of my jobs and switched to remote work for the other. We've been staying at my dad's seaside apartment while Ted's on leave. His boss has been very understanding. It's mid-January now. The weather is gloomy, but the ocean view helps calm my mind. Being far from all that madness has been healing. I also changed my phone number so Ted's family can't reach me anymore. And honestly, it's the best decision I've made. It's just me, Ted, and our cat here. I filed for a restraining order against Ash. I'm not sure what legal steps brother number 1 is taking for his daughter, but I know he made her delete her social media accounts. If there are further actions, that's their call. We're moving soon, not sure where yet, but both of us know that our current house no longer feels like home. Over the next few weeks, we'll start looking for a new place closer to my family. As for what was in the locked guest bathroom, sorry to disappoint, but there were no body parts or horror movie scenes. It was just more of the same stuff they'd already found in the main bathroom. I don't think Ash is some serial killer in the making. He's just a severely disturbed man with self-destructive coping mechanisms and deeply unhealthy attachments. One commenter suggested he might have some deep-rooted hatred or distorted view of women, and honestly, I agree. All of his disturbing behavior was directed at women. Me, his niece, and even his cat, Sunny. But again, I'm not a professional. How am I doing? It depends on the day. Some days are easier, some aren't. I have therapy sessions every other day. And thank you to those who suggested bringing white noise or headphones into the bathroom. It's actually helped a lot. My sisters take turns visiting me, so I'm rarely alone for long. Many of you asked what Ash's childhood was like. What could have caused this? These are Ted's words. When you grow up with 8 older brothers, you become an easy target for criticism, comparisons, and impossible expectations. When the older ones needed somewhere to unload their frustration, Ash was the weakest, the one they picked on. I'm not excusing anything, but there were things even I couldn't protect him from. Now, as an adult, I see how messed up it all was, and so do my brothers. We each have our own demons to fight. We didn't have a supportive family. Everything was swept under the rug instead of being addressed. It left us broken, unable to tell right from wrong. Some of us got better, thanks to our partners, jobs, and experience, but we still have a long way to go. We can't undo the past. All we can do is acknowledge it and try to be better tomorrow. Why didn't anyone check on his cat sooner? Because there was no reason to suspect anything. Sunny was never a very social cat, so during lockdown video calls, it made sense that she wasn't visible. We weren't visiting anyone during the pandemic, so we had no idea what was happening in his home. Before that, everything seemed fine. Him, the house, the cat. I truly don't know what signs we could have seen or how we could have prevented all this. And I'm so sorry for failing that innocent animal. the guilt of not being able to help her will stay with me forever. Some asked how 3 of Ted's 10 brothers managed to fly across the country so quickly to help. Well, there weren't always 10 brothers. And as for how they managed it, I don't know what to say. They realized how serious the situation was, took time off to leave, and came to help. Their wives handled things at home. That's all there is to it. People also ask how no one noticed anything earlier. Honestly, that's a question for Ted's family. I'm not close with them anymore. Ted says he didn't notice any signs, but admits his closeness to Ash might have blinded him to the truth. So that's my life right now. I'm tired, I'm sad, things still feel heavy, but I have a great therapist who keeps reminding me that I'm safe, that I'm okay, and that healing will take time. Sorry for the long update. And thank you, truly, for your kindness and for taking the time to read about my mess. Edit. I realize I caused confusion earlier. When I mentioned Ted having 10 brothers, I didn't mean there were only sons. It's not my story to fully tell, but from what I know, there were 3 sisters too. 2 died in childhood from health complications, which explains the big age gap between the older brothers and Ted and Ash. The 3rd sister's story is more complicated. She was born between brother number 4 and number 5. And yes, they had a lot of kids. They don't believe in contraception. Sorry again for the mix-up.
Update 3. Hey everyone, it's been about 2 months since all this chaos started. During that time, I've gotten tons of messages and comments asking for an update, most of them kind and supportive. Of course, there were a few nasty ones too, but at this point, I've made peace with the fact that it's just part of internet culture. First off, sorry it took me so long to write this. I know many of you are curious about what's been happening with Ted's family, but I really needed time to process everything. Anyway, here's another miserable little piece of the puzzle so you can finally get some closure. So, Ted asked me to move out for a while. He's been struggling a lot emotionally and said my presence was only making things harder for him. He's drowning in guilt, and dealing with all those skeletons from his family's closet is too heavy for anyone. We're not officially divorced, but we're not looking for a new place together either. We're still in the process of selling our old house. Ted's living there, and I've been staying with my parents. I honestly don't know what will happen once the house is sold or what he really wants, but I promised to give him space. He did allow me to post this update, though, because despite some hateful messages, most of you have been incredibly kind and supportive. Now, as promised, here is the updated version of Ted's family tree, including the sisters. Brother number 1, doctor with a military background, married, 3 kids. Brother number 2, surgeon, married, has 2 dogs and a bearded dragon. Brother number 3, engineer, engaged, 1 dog. Brother number 4, teacher and researcher, married, 1 child. Sister number 1, deceased. Brother number 5, works in IT, married, not many details. Brother number 6, doctor, single, open to dating. Brother number 7, chef or businessman, married, 1 kid. Brother number 8, car salesman, married, 3 kids, and some fish. Sisters number 2 and 3, both deceased. Brother number 9, married, possibly divorced now, 1 cat. Brother number 10, Ash. Now, about the sisters. I only mentioned them this time because, well, the family story is already insane, and this just adds another layer. I didn't include them earlier because Ted never talks about them. For him, they've simply never existed. All 3 sisters were born and passed away before Ted was even conceived. So in his mind,
he only has brothers. You guys came up with some wild theories, some surprisingly close to the truth, some totally unhinged, but honestly, given what we know about this family, a bit of insanity seems to run in their blood. Anyway, no, the sisters weren't murdered. Sisters number 2 and 3 were twins who died shortly after birth due to a developmental defect. Their lungs never fully formed. That's all Ted knows. I don't talk to his family anymore, so I can't confirm more details. Sister number 1 died in a motorcycle accident. One of the brothers was driving, underage and drunk. I didn't mention this before because it wasn't my story to tell. It had nothing to do with my situation, and I still believe people deserve privacy, so I'm not saying which brother it was. Many of you also asked about the dark secrets Ted's mother supposedly forgave her sons for. I'll share only what's been openly discussed before. I won't name which brother did what, except for brother number 7, since I already told his story. So, here's what I know. Brothers 1 to 4 were the classic golden boys. Smart, athletic, high-achieving. That set the bar ridiculously high for the younger ones. The family expected every child to excel in school, sports, get a scholarship because paying for 10 college educations wasn't realistic, and build a successful career. But brother number 7 wanted none of that. He's a smart guy, but thought it was unfair that his life had to be a constant competition with his siblings. After high school, he told his parents he was going abroad to study culinary arts. His scholarship supposedly covered part of his tuition, but not housing. His parents were thrilled. Their son was going to become a world-famous chef. They agreed to help with expenses as long as he kept good grades and cooked at family gatherings. In reality, he moved to New York, shared an apartment with 4 roommates, and pretended to live abroad. This was before video calls were common, so it wasn't hard to pull off. He just needed to call his parents at times that matched the time zone difference. He even made up stories for family holidays. His parents sent him money for tuition and rent, but he invested it and eventually made a decent profit. Years later, he returned to the West Coast, claiming he was managing restaurants. The truth came out only when one of the nieces said she wanted to apply to the same school and asked him about it. By then, he was already financially stable, so there weren't major consequences. And to be fair, the man can really cook. He still handles Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners. Now for the rest of the family drama. Things I learned from Ted, his mom, or the brothers themselves, and for which none of them were ever punished. Stealing and completely wrecking at least 2 cars, same brother, both times. Another brother also stole a car. Leaving their grandmother alone for a week, even though they were supposed to care for her. Stealing and selling things from their own home. Fistfights that ended with police involvement. Other fights that didn't involve police but did end up with hospital visits. Skipping major school events, stealing trip money or pocketing class funds. Public nudity, indecent behavior, and urinating in public, apparently a family tradition. One stalking incident that ended with a restraining order. Frequent teenage drinking and underage drunk driving. As for their father, last time I saw him, he was in an urn on their mother's mantle, hopefully still there. In life, he was an awful, misogynistic, abusive husband and father. Somehow, though, he managed to act like a decent grandpa. And before anyone judges, why did you let the kids near him? That's not on me. I don't have children. Ted's siblings do. Ted's parents were, and his mother still is, very traditional. They only ever cared about appearances, the image of a perfect family with proud sons and beautiful daughters. I'm not excusing them, but losing their daughters really broke them and the whole family dynamic. As for why they had more kids after that, they desperately wanted another girl. They tried twice more, then couldn't have children anymore. I don't know if they would have kept trying or if the infertility made things worse emotionally. As for Ash, I honestly don't know how he's doing. I'd love to say I don't care, but I do a little. Therapy has made me more empathetic, and I can see that he's a sick person. I just hope he gets better. Far, far away from me. And that's pretty much everything I can tell you about Ted's family. Big shout out to brother number 6, though. He's been supportive throughout all of this. Still single, by the way, and made me promise to mention that. So, if anyone on the West Coast is looking for a kind, attractive doctor from an absolutely bonkers family, here's your chance. As for me, things are still rough. I had to quit my second job after already leaving the first one. So, yeah, I'm unemployed and living with my parents right now. But my dad says he doesn't care as long as I'm okay, and I love him for that. I'm still going to therapy. It's the one thing keeping me grounded these days.
Update 4. Over the past year, I've written so many drafts of updates, some funny, some sad, a few drunken, but never posted any of them. I was waiting for the right ending to this entire saga. But now I understand. Real life doesn't have perfect endings. Things always keep happening. I just hope that, for all of us, this really is the end of the story, that I can finally move on, and that you'll all get some sense of closure, too. I also hope that writing this will bring me a little peace. I'm finally in a place where I can open up without being weighed down by guilt for staying silent so long. It honestly means a lot that so many of you kept checking in on me, sending kind messages, and caring. It feels surreal that almost a year has passed, and yet I still get sweet DMs from strangers wishing me happiness. If I didn't reply, please know I read every single message, and they warmed my heart. It's comforting to know there are still so many good people in the world, wishing well to someone they'll never meet. I'll admit, part of me is always scared to post updates. On one hand, there are real-life consequences. People have already managed to figure out who I am. On the other hand, every time I write one, it feels like drawing a line under something painful, and part of me wants to keep pretending it never happened. My therapist says that's not a healthy way to cope, which is why I'm here again. It's wild to think that all of this started just a few days after last New Year's. I still remember Ted and me curled up on the couch, wishing for 2021 to be full of adventures and new experiences. Well, wish granted, I guess. I'll be a lot more careful with what I wish for next time. I honestly don't even know what I'll do this New Year's. Maybe I'll take a small trip somewhere, just something to clear my head. What I don't want is to sit on the couch and replay everything in my mind again. Though I have to admit that couch was ridiculously comfortable, and I do miss it. I love Ted. A part of me probably always will. We spent so much of our lives together. He was my person. It still feels surreal that he's no longer in my life. In short, he asked for a divorce, just like that. It was as gentle a breakup as one can possibly have in our circumstances. We both cried through most of it. He kept calling, apologizing. I begged him not to leave. But as much as it hurt, I knew deep down that he needed this to heal from everything that happened. We're still friends. We were best friends for so many years that even if the romantic part is gone, there will always be a bond. I know you're not here to read about my broken heart, though. You want the messy family updates. So I'll share what I know. Just note that since Ted and I are no longer together, I don't have every detail. I'll break things down by sections for clarity, not in chronological order, but organized by people. My former family. Brother 8. Married, 3 kids, a cat, and now a few fish, too. I haven't heard from them since the divorce, but before that, I know they adopted a kitten named Bob. Brother 7. Married, 1 child. No clue what's going on there. Haven't asked, haven't been asked.
Brother 6. No longer single. He's dating someone amazing. His new girlfriend actually found my story on this very forum and still loves him, despite his chaotic family background. We've met a few times over the past year. She's truly wonderful. Sure, there are occasional family tensions, but overall, they're doing great. Brother 6 was also the one who came to see me right after Ted asked for the divorce. He hugged me and said I'd always be his little sister, no matter what. That was bittersweet. Losing a husband and half of the family I once thought was mine, but at least I still have one brother left. I only ever had sisters of my own, so that means a lot. Brother 5. Married. He never liked me, and I finally understand why. Turns out he didn't like Ted much either. The brothers were awful to each other growing up, and apparently number 5 was the worst of the bunch. Ted often defended Ash, which put him at odds with number 5, and their tension never went away. I have zero contact with him now, and I'm keeping it that way. Brother 4, married, one child. He's always been level-headed. He personally made sure Ash's name is blacklisted in every local animal shelter, pet store, and vet clinic. He said that even if Ash has become a saint, he's not willing to risk another animal's safety. Honestly, knowing that makes it easier to leave that family behind. At least the cats are safe. Of course, there's always the chance that a stray might wander to him or someone might gift him a pet, but Brother 4 swore he'd do everything possible to prevent that. Brother 3, now officially married with a dog. Back when this whole saga began, they were only engaged. Their wedding was beautiful. I didn't go, even though both of them insisted that I was still part of the family. Ted wanted me there too, but I didn't want to ruin their photos or bring tension. I attended via Zoom, though, and it was genuinely lovely. Brother 2, married, 2 dogs, and a lizard. He was one of the first to step up and take action when everything went down. He apologized to me countless times for pushing us to let Ash stay with us, for everything that followed, and even for how his own actions might have impacted Ted's mental health. I accepted the first 2 apologies, but for the third, I told him that wasn't mine to forgive. He understood. He said he'd keep working on healing their family and admitted that it wasn't fair that I ended up paying the emotional price for someone else's mistakes. After the divorce, he texted to say that if I ever needed anything, he'd always be there. It was a sweet gesture. I know he's seeing a therapist too, and honestly, good for him. Brother 1, married, 3 kids. If you remember, he was the angriest about everything that happened, especially since it involved his daughter. The last time I mentioned them, they'd asked me to keep my distance and give them time. But later, his oldest daughter reached out to me herself. She's such a bright young woman. She said she missed how things were before all this chaos. I didn't ask what exactly her parents had told her, but I assume they explained the situation in some way. She's old enough now to start asking the right questions. Eventually, they decided not to press charges against Ash, but they did move across the country, thankfully for her daughter's sake. She found an incredible culinary program on the East Coast and is absolutely thriving there. Her younger daughter, from what I've heard from Ted's mother-in-law and sister-in-law, is also doing fine. She barely interacted with Ash outside of holidays. Apparently, the reason he fixated on her photos wasn't personal. She just looks exactly like their father, and combined with the fact that she's a girl, it triggered him. I'll explain that part later. She's still seeing a therapist, but hates every minute of it, claiming it has nothing to do with her. She's mostly angry about the move and leaving her friends behind. Anyway, that family seems to be safe and rebuilding. They're slowly settling into life on the East Coast. The parents still keep their distance from me, which I completely understand. They're not fans of the colder weather, but I told their eldest daughter she's always welcome to visit me. Brother 1's wife is kind enough to allow it. As for Brother 1 himself, we haven't spoken since. All communication goes through his wife and kids. I was the first among my sisters to get married. And since Ted's family hadn't had a big celebration in years, his older brothers were much older, everyone was thrilled. I never regretted marrying Ted for a single second, but honestly, I could have done without the grand wedding. Sometimes I wish we had just gone to the courthouse alone or run off to Vegas to be married by Elvis. I'm not even sure people still do that, but it sounds a lot cooler than a 200-guest circus. I remember when we finally agreed to the big wedding, and my mother-in-law was absolutely over the moon. For the first time, it felt like she saw me as more than just another daughter-in-law added to the pile. It might sound silly, but that feeling, being accepted into the family, actually meant something to me, even if it came at the price of a massive wedding. I tried to include her in everything. With 10 sons, she probably never got many chances to help plan girly things. At first she was sweet to me, maybe just to get her way, and I was too naive to see it. I stayed the golden daughter-in-law for a while after the wedding, probably up until another grandchild was born. Then I was relieved to step back and return to a more comfortable distance. Being her favorite was exhausting. It came with too many expectations. It's wild to think how badly I once wanted her to love me, and how now I'd give anything for her to forget I even exist. After Ash was sent to a psychiatric clinic, my mother-in-law did everything she could to destroy me. I cut contact with her and most of the family for a while, eventually rebuilding ties with a few of them, but not with her. I've only seen her once since then, when she came to pack up Ash's apartment. She deliberately came to my parents' house just to scream at me. It was horrible and perfectly timed. My parents were both at work, my sisters too. I opened the door, and there she was. No greetings, no pretending. She unloaded everything at once, every imaginary slight, every accusation. She called me a worthless wife, said she hoped the divorce would crush me, that she'd make sure her son took everything from me, that she wouldn't rest until I was homeless. And the worst thing she said, the one line that burned itself into my mind, was that she was grateful I was barren, because she couldn't stand the thought of me tainting their blood. Ted and I never actively tried for children, but we never prevented it either. We just figured if it happens, it happens. It never did. And now I can't help but wonder if it makes me a terrible person that part of me feels grateful for that. Our neighbors called the police that day. They escorted her out. That's how my sister found me, sitting on the floor, holding our cat, shaking. She called Ted, and I think he heard the details from his fifth brother, the one who must have driven her there. I didn't see him myself. We haven't spoken since. I don't know what Ted told her or what she told him. I only know that she left me alone after that, and for that, I'm thankful. Ted is probably the most decent ex-husband in the universe. I could tell 1,000 stories about him. It's strange to be without him now, but I try to respect his choices. When he asked for a divorce, he said, "I can't be with you anymore. I'll never forgive myself for what I put you through. I don't want to keep exposing you to my family's madness." At the time, I was furious. He was making decisions for me without asking what I wanted. But after a lot of therapy, I realized he wasn't doing it for me at all. He was doing it for himself, to ease his guilt, or maybe to convince himself that ending things was some kind of mercy. Maybe being apart helped him pretend none of it happened. Or maybe he genuinely thought he was protecting me. But it hurt because I always saw us as a team, not me versus him, us, and his decision destroyed that team completely. Some days I wake up hating him. Other days I just stare at my phone debating whether to call. Sometimes I do, and he always answers, always kind, always calm, reminding me that he's still around. We sold the house, and of course he moved out. For a while he went to the West Coast to deal with family matters during the divorce, then came back, his work was here, and he loved it. I can't tell if I'm glad he's still in the same city, or I hate him for ruining it. Every street, every cafe, every corner has memories of him. Maybe I'm the one who should leave and start fresh, somewhere no one knows my past. As for Ash, when he was first sent to a psychiatric facility after the fight with his brothers, numbers 3, 4, and 8, the same ones who came at the beginning to help, he stayed there for several weeks. He kept begging to see Ted, but Ted never went. He did, however, send him a letter. At first, I didn't want to know what it said, but later I asked. Ted told me he wrote, "Stop asking for visits, start focusing on yourself and your life, stop putting yourself above your own needs." A few weeks later, brother number 3 arranged for Ash to be transferred to the West Coast. I don't know whether they placed him in another facility or left him under family care. His mother, along with brothers 5 and 7, came to pack his things and move him officially. Afterward, Ash lived with his mother, and brother number 2 was put in charge of making sure he continued treatment, and I'm pretty sure he still does. When Ted went west to deal with family stuff, it was rough for him. He met with some of his brothers, maybe not all, but definitely the ones most involved. According to Ted, brother number 3 shared some insights from Ash's doctors. They said Ash had suffered a psychotic episode and remained in treatment afterward. I never heard the full diagnosis, but Ted said the therapists had gone deep into their childhood, their family dynamics, and especially how Ted's overprotectiveness had fostered an unhealthy attachment. When Ted told me all this, he sounded detached, like he was talking about strangers. Maybe that's how he copes. Many of you asked what could have happened to Ash to make him the way he was. Here's part of it. I won't say which brothers did what. You can fill in those blanks yourself, but yes, most of your guesses were disturbingly close to the truth. Beyond the usual bullying, beatings, humiliation, mockery, there were far worse things. They locked him in closets, stole his clothes, left him outside overnight, blocked all the bathrooms so he'd wet himself. They threatened him with weapons, abandoned him miles from home and made him walk back in any weather. They put him in diapers, tied him up, dragged him around on ATVs, poured water on him and left him freezing. They even sprinkled itching powder in his underwear. It's horrifying, isn't it? I know siblings fight, but this was beyond cruelty. What could he possibly have done to deserve that? It doesn't excuse what Ash later became, but it explains a lot, especially his deep resentment toward women. In his mind, women were weak, useless. His mother hadn't protected him, so how could any woman? And his brothers had kept him isolated from any girl who showed him interest. That's how his twisted attachment to Ted formed. Ted was the only one who ever defended him, and we all know how that ended. Now Ash is somewhere out west. I hope he stays there. I kept 2 pairs of shoes that Ash had ruined with his disgusting golden shower. Everything else I threw away. One pair was the first thing I ever bought with money from my first internship. They symbolized independence to me. Losing my job, my home, my peace, it all felt like those shoes had lost their meaning. But now as I rebuild my life piece by piece, new home, new job, small steps, I look at them differently. I haven't worn them since that day. But maybe someday I will again, when I finally feel whole. Happy holidays, everyone. I don't know what mine will look like this year, but I truly hope yours are filled with light and peace.
Update 5. It's been a long time since I last came here. I'll try to keep this one short. Some people messaged me saying my updates were too long or that I took forever to get to the point. If that bothers you, feel free to skip this. My life isn't meant to be your entertainment. I'm only writing because I've received an incredible amount of kindness and support from people asking how I've been and wanting to know what's new. So if this seems too long, stop reading any time. My story won't change your life anyway, except maybe as something to pass the time. The last time I wrote was before the holidays, and honestly, my plans for them were pretty terrible. I swore I wouldn't sit around wallowing in self-pity, but guess how that went? Yeah, exactly that. I just didn't have the strength to celebrate. My family absolutely loves Christmas. The lights, the laughter, the chaos. I didn't want to bring my mood into it,
So I told my dad I'd be spending the day with a friend who'd recently lost her husband. She actually went to visit his parents, and I stayed home with my cat watching movies. Ted called me on Christmas Day, and for the first time, I didn't answer with, "Are you proud of me?" I know a lot of people here will be happy about that. So many of you told me to cut all contact completely. But please understand, I couldn't just erase someone who had been my best friend for 10 years. Later, he texted to ask if I was okay. He said he saw some photos of my sister on Facebook and noticed I wasn't in any of them. I should probably ask my sisters to block him. He adores them, and they still care about him too. Before everything went downhill, Ted was honestly a wonderful person. Even now, he's trying his best. Maybe I'm biased, but he's not the monster people imagine. He's going through something deeply traumatic too. Facing the truth about what his family did isn't easy. I stared at his message for hours, trying to decide what to write back, and ended up not answering at all. I wasn't doing well, but he's still the one who knows me better than anyone. Our 10 years together weren't wasted. We didn't split because we stopped loving each other. We split because it was what we both needed. I had my family and all of you to lean on. Ted didn't. Some of his brothers hate him even more now. He lost his best friend, his little brother, his wife, and in a way, even his mother. It's easy to paint him as the villain, the one who hurt me. But you've only heard my side. He's still human. He made mistakes, but he's not evil. And I don't think he'll ever see our divorce as one of those mistakes. Eventually, I just replied something like, "Wasn't in the mood to celebrate. Stayed home. Merry Christmas." He must have sensed something was wrong because he showed up. He knows the area where I live and the park I love walking in. He asked if we could meet, and I agreed. Yeah, I know, not exactly a boundary win, but baby steps, right? We talked for hours. I didn't realize he'd spent Christmas alone, too. Maybe if I had, I would have invited him over or gone to my parents with him. Many of you insisted that cutting him off completely was the healthiest option, but I don't agree. Maybe I'll change my mind later, but right now, I think we still need each other a little. Every day I feel like I need him less, but that day I really did. And sometimes he still needs me too. I want to believe we can stay friends, though deep down I know that probably won't last. Someday he'll have a new partner, and I doubt she'll be thrilled about me. Or maybe we'll just drift apart naturally, or I'll finally get angry enough to hate him. But right now, he helps me in ways no one else can. It might sound silly, but I don't think anyone else truly understands who I am now. I'm not the same woman I was before all this, not even the same as a year ago. What happened with his family changed us both. Not everyone understands why I can't calmly take my kids to the bathroom anymore, or why I had to leave work early when my boss gave me sunflowers on Women's Day. Ted does. He's barely in contact with his family now, just minimal messages with brother number 4 and brother number 6. So I don't have much to update about Ash or the others. Brother 6 says he's sad Ted is pulled away from him too, since he's also cut off most of the family. But he understands and says he'll be there when Ted's ready. A lot of people told me what I used to call bullying was actually abuse, and they're right. That word matters. For too long, I downplayed it, brushed it off as boys being boys, or that's just how brothers are. I thought it was normal. By minimizing it, I became part of the problem, the same problem that eventually broke everything. If any of us, the wives or I, had known the real extent of what happened in their childhood, so many choices would have been different. Of course, much of the blame lies with my ex-mother-in-law, but I think everyone's learned their lesson now. I'm not ready to date again. I need to learn how to be alone. Ted and I had been together since college. It's been so long that I'm not even sure I remember how to go on a first date anymore. But hey, that's what Google's for. Being alone took some getting used to. I don't even want to call it loneliness. Sometimes it's peaceful.
You finish your book, and the apartment is quiet. Not in a sad way, just calm. I've learned a lot. I realized how often I relied on others for things I could have done myself. I changed a tire for the first time, terrified because the blowout happened on the highway, but I did it. I learned plants have different needs after killing a few. Now I've got a little basil plant that's thriving. I discovered I actually don't like action movies. Too fast, too loud. I learned how to cook shrimp. Ted couldn't eat them because of his allergy, so I never made them before. Tip: don't forget to remove the vein. There are things I miss without him, though, like having someone to drive me to the ER when I sliced my hand cutting carrots. By the way, hospitals really should have valet service. Or sitting alone at the vet's office when my cat got sick. Or having no one to hold me on the anniversary of my childhood friend's death. Oh, and I absolutely hate mopping floors, but now that's my job. That's about it. I haven't seen Ted since Christmas, but we text occasionally and have had a couple of phone calls. We're learning how to be apart without completely cutting off the support we still give each other. We're both still healing. But now, for the first time, I can honestly say, I see the light. Before, I was just existing day by day. His birthday is coming up soon. I don't think I'll go, but I'll make sure friends check on him so he's not alone. I think this is the right moment for a final update. A quiet ending with a bit of hope for the future. Though, who knows? Maybe one day I'll surprise you with another post titled, Another Year Later. For now, I can finally say, it's going to be okay.
Update 6. Hello, dear readers. How are you all doing? Almost a full year has flown by. We've all grown a little older, and hopefully a little wiser, too. It still amazes me that after all this time, there are people who continue to follow my story, sending kind words and thoughtful messages. For my haters and those who don't enjoy my long monologues, here's your short version. I bought a robot mop, my basil plant died, life seemed to finally get better, my ex-husband tried to hurt himself, and now I'm back living with my parents. Following some advice from commenters, I first bought a steam mop. It helped, sure, but I still had to deal with wet floors, and stepping into damp socks has always been one of my biggest annoyances. Then, following other advice, I got a robot mop. I already had a robot vacuum, but had no idea mopping versions even existed. It's perfect. I love it. I set it up before leaving the house, and when I come back, everything's clean and dry. Best feeling ever. My poor little basil plant didn't make it. Totally my fault. I moved it from the kitchen to get more sunlight, and it just couldn't handle the change. I used the last leaves in a pasta salad. Arugula, cherry tomatoes, mozzarella balls, olive oil, salt, and basil. Simple and delicious. Someone gave me miniature roses afterward. I killed those too within a couple of months and finally accepted that living plants and I are not compatible. Life sucks and then you die. One of my sisters always loved that saying. She sees it as a reminder not to dwell on the bad because life is short. But to me right now, it sounds painfully literal. I went on a date recently. A friend introduced me to one of his coworkers. It was awkward. I couldn't tell if I'd always been that socially clumsy, or if first dates are just meant to be weird, or if we simply didn't click. The whole dinner, I had this overwhelming fight or flight feeling. He was nice, though. Maybe dinner was too formal. People probably do coffee dates these days, and that might have been easier. Or maybe I'm just not ready yet. My new job, well, not so new anymore, is wonderful. My boss no longer gives me flowers. I'm not sure if he figured it out himself or someone told him about last year, but when everyone else gets bouquets, I get lamps. Sounds odd, but I love lamps and anything that glows. Over the past year, he's given me a cat-shaped nightlight, a string of fairy lights, and a Himalayan salt lamp.
He's a genuinely kind person, and I appreciate his thoughtfulness so much. My coworkers are amazing, and for the first time, I feel like my work actually has meaning. I used to have 2 jobs, one for the soul and one for the bills. Now I have one that gives me both, and that feels almost miraculous. Sometimes I regret wasting so many years in places that drained me. So this feels like a win. I know I'm rambling again. It's just hard to know where to start or what's safe to share. And to be honest, it's a bit unsettling knowing some people are still quietly watching me through this account. I don't really care, but it's a strange feeling, like being observed from afar. Ash was a victim of severe abuse growing up. Everyone was shocked when the truth came out, mostly because he'd always kept up the image of being perfectly fine. Prestigious engineering degree, solid career, a stable life after college. It all started unraveling during the pandemic lockdowns. I've thought about it a lot. Would he have broken down if the pandemic hadn't happened? Or would something else have triggered it? Would someone else have opened that closet full of skeletons? The endless what-ifs are exhausting. I've imagined dozens of alternate realities, some happy, some tragic. I know it's unhealthy to dwell on it, but sometimes I envy those imaginary versions of life where things turned out differently. And no, Ted didn't die, though even typing that feels surreal. He's still here, more or less okay. It took a lot of therapy sessions for me to accept that what happened wasn't my fault. I was just caught in the middle. What Ash became was the result of years of abuse and neglect from his family. Sooner or later, it would have surfaced with or without me. I like to believe someone else might have eventually convinced him to see a real therapist who could have helped him. But we'll never know. The only thing I'm truly grateful for is that the breaking point involved me and not Brother One's daughter. The consequences would have been far more horrific otherwise. After the divorce, I still kept light contact with Brother Six, but after advice from many of you, and from people in my life, I decided to distance myself. A few months later, he reached out asking if I'd heard from Ted. I said no. He told me something serious had happened in the family. No details, and I didn't ask. He said everyone had been trying to reach Ted but couldn't. He was worried and said he was planning to come to town to check on him. Asked me to let him know if Ted contacted me. I knew Ted had been deliberately keeping his family at a distance, including Brother Six, so it didn't surprise me much. Still, Ted would never ignore a genuine family emergency. I texted him that his brother had reached out, trying to find him. He read it, but didn't reply. At that point, we were already pretty distant, just like many of you had advised, so his silence didn't alarm me too much. A couple of weeks later, Brother Six messaged again. He was in town and wanted to meet. I agreed. I'd missed him. I suggested a new restaurant I thought he'd love, but he said just coffee. That was strange. He's a total foodie and never turns down a chance to try new places. But I figured he was short on time and wanted to focus on Ted. We met in my favorite park, and he looked awful. I instinctively stepped back. That gut feeling when you know bad news is coming. I honestly thought he was going to say, Ash is back, but instead he looked completely defeated. He told me something else had surfaced in the family. I didn't ask what. I don't care anymore. Sorry to disappoint those hoping for spicy details. I know that's what draws half of you here. Anyway, when he went to Ted's place, he found him in terrible shape. Ted had never been much of a drinker, only on holidays, socially, but that morning, at 10 a.m. on a Saturday, he was completely wasted. His brother stayed with him, sobered him up, and the next day told him about the family matter. He went back to his hotel to grab his things, and when he returned to Ted's apartment, he found him unconscious. He called an ambulance. Ted was taken to the hospital and stayed there for a while. I don't know if something new had happened or if the weight of the last 2 years finally broke him, but it looked like he'd been living in self-destruction mode for a long time. My therapist said it makes sense, that maybe it even explains why he chose to end our marriage. Maybe I'm just looking for a reason, but knowing Ted, it fits. He's always been the protector type, even as a kid shielding Ash. He's the kind of person who makes sure no one spikes a girl's drink at a bar or checks on a child standing alone on the street. He has controlling tendencies, usually born from anxiety. He's a meticulous planner, but when things go off script, it shakes him. He's strict, but incredibly dependable. I always loved that about him. During our final talks before the divorce, he kept apologizing over and over for not protecting me, for putting me in harm's way. Even when I told him it wasn't his fault, I don't think he ever believed me. He had to face a painful truth. His family wasn't what he thought. He realized he'd helped silence things, downplay things, excuse things. He had to confront how horrifying their childhood really was and what monsters some of his brothers became. It crushed him. He was fighting trauma, guilt, helplessness. Eventually, Ted checked himself into a rehabilitation center. He didn't let me visit, but sent letters. They're too personal to share here, but reading them were emotional. The first few were full of apologies for worrying me, for everything. Then came longer, scattered ones, and some truly beautiful. I could see him slowly shifting from overly polite and self-blaming to someone closer to the man I'd once loved. Watching him begin to finally understand what I'd been trying to tell him for years felt like witnessing a kind of catharsis. He said writing helped him process, and I believe it. That's why I still write these updates. Why letters to me, though, instead of a journal? I don't know, but I'm not complaining. There was one letter where he was just angry, furious at everyone and everything. And weirdly, that one made me the happiest. It meant the fire was coming back. He even called me a nickname he hadn't used since before our wedding, and honestly, it infuriated me.
It wasn't anything serious. He was just reminiscing about that trip we once took to visit friends. A couple who ended up fighting the entire time. They argued so badly that they wanted to leave halfway through the vacation. Everything had already been paid for, but they simply couldn't stay together anymore. So we split up. The guys and the girls did everything separately. Ted was miserable the whole trip. Later, he sent me a message that said something like, "I still haven't forgiven Alice for Venice. You were supposed to be the one in that damn gondola with me, Peaches, not Steve." The nickname itself didn't bother me, but reading it brought back that old ache, the feeling of loss, the memories of what we'd lost. Against his earlier wishes, I replied to the message. That one answer led to us talking again. He wasn't upset that I broke his no replies rule. Maybe he had wanted that all along. We ended up exchanging letters for several weeks, and honestly, it was nice. We never mentioned Ash or his family, not once. Maybe it just never came up, or maybe he was avoiding the topic on purpose. Either way, it felt so good to talk to him again, like we used to. When we first met, we used to chat through Facebook Messenger, and this whole exchange brought me right back to those early days. Silly as it sounds, I still love him. I still miss him. These letters made me feel like I'd gotten my best friend back, even if he's no longer my husband. Ted's back in his own place now. For a while, his brother, number 3, and his wife stayed with him, along with their dog, while Ted recovered. Thanks to remote work, that worked out fine. He's on antidepressants now, has a lot of people supporting him, and honestly, he's doing so much better. He stopped pushing everyone away, but still keeps healthy boundaries, and that's such a good thing. He talks to brothers 3, 4, and 6 again. They were always the closest to him, besides Ash. He still doesn't talk to the rest of the family, though, which is a little sad, especially because I know he loved some of his nieces and nephews deeply. I think he misses them, but keeping his distance is probably the right choice. Funny enough, brother number 6 also doesn't talk to most of the family anymore. He's always been more withdrawn, a bit like Ted and Ash. Maybe he understood more than the others. After everything that happened, he grew closer to brothers 3 and 4. Another small silver lining, I suppose. Ted and I have met up a few times, sometimes at group events, sometimes just to talk. I can truly see the difference in him. He's gained back some weight, his hair looks healthy again, and he doesn't slump his shoulders anymore. Just last week, he finally returned to work after being on medical leave, and I can tell it's given him back his sense of purpose. He was never the type to sit still, so that downtime must have been torture for him. We went to an animal shelter together recently. He adopted an older cat named Socks, probably because of its white paws. Sweet cat, but missing a bunch of teeth. Ted's been trying to rename him Macbeth, but the cat clearly isn't having it. To be fair, Socks doesn't really respond to socks either, so maybe there's still hope. As for me, I'm still on the East Coast, and 2022 hit us hard. 2 hurricanes slammed into our city, and my apartment got flooded. Whenever a state of emergency is declared, Dad always tells us to come home, so the cat and I were safe, but it was still a nightmare. I don't know if it was the universe sending a message, but remember those 2 pairs of shoes I kept? They were both completely ruined. I tried everything to save them, even spoke with restoration specialists, but they were beyond repair. And it wasn't just them. Half my belongings had to be thrown away, including so many sentimental things. You guys know how attached I am to shoes, even when they've practically turned into biohazards. My poor apartment took a beating. We had to rip out the floors. Mold had already started growing underneath by the time we could even get inside. Most of my furniture was destroyed. All my electronics, even my poor little robot mop. I did have sandbags, but they didn't help much. Insurance covered some of it, but definitely not everything. Filing those claims was its own special kind of hell. In the end, it made more sense to renovate and sell the apartment. I've always hated moving, but this time it hit me harder than usual. Maybe because I had so little to pack. I filled just a few boxes. Even when I went to college, I took more with me. So yeah, I'm back living with my parents. It's both annoying and comforting. The house feels emptier now. My youngest sister recently left for college, but at least I have the cats. And honestly, cats make great company. Right now, I'm finalizing the purchase of a new condo, in a high-rise this time just to avoid another flood. I'll miss the park near my old place, but the new neighborhood is great. Everything's close by, and I could even bike to work if I ever learn how to ride one. Why can't I? Because Dad was overprotective and convinced we'd all die if we got on a bike as kids. I don't know if it's too late to learn now, but I'm ready to swallow my pride and start with training wheels if I have to. That's where things stand right now. I'm focusing on work and spending more time with my parents. I've planned a trip for March, my first solo trip ever. I'm terrified. Dad used to be the planner, and I have no idea if I'm doing it right. But maybe that's the point, to figure it out myself. I'm even taking language classes for the country I'm visiting, so we'll see how that goes. There's something else I wanted to share, the real reason for this update. Remember how brother number 6 met with me back then to talk about Ted? I was terrified he'd tell me Ash was back. Thankfully, that wasn't the case. But while Ted was still in treatment, a letter arrived at my parents' house. From Ash. For the first time in 2 years, I didn't feel fear. Maybe it's because I'd been exchanging letters with Ted, or maybe I just finally healed a bit. My therapist probably deserves a raise. I even offered, but he laughed and said that's not how therapy works. Anyway, I read the letter. Ash apologized. He admitted to a lot of things he'd done, small acts of aggression, manipulative behavior, things I hadn't even recognized for what they were back then. He didn't try to justify himself, just owned it. He also confessed to a few things I hadn't known about, some of which a few of you actually guessed. The letter was messy, desperate, but I understood why. He apologized for hurting Ted, said he probably understood Ted's pain better than anyone else, that he knew he'd caused irreparable damage and could never be part of Ted's life again. He said that even if he couldn't make amends directly, maybe acknowledging his mistakes and apologizing to me was his way of honoring Ted indirectly, of trying to atone even a little. One line really stuck with me. "I'm sorry I ruined your marriage, but I don't think I ruined your life. Ted wouldn't have chosen you if you weren't strong." He thanked me for trying, and I really did try in the beginning. I wanted to stay friends with him, but after the
incident with the urine, that became impossible. He admitted he'd given up on the idea that anyone but Ted would fight for him, and apologized for never giving me a chance. He said he envied the happiness I brought Ted, a happiness he himself couldn't give, and now regrets that his actions cost Ted that joy. I think writing the letter was his way of easing his guilt, acknowledging what he'd done to his beloved brother, and maybe respecting Ted's boundaries in the only way he knew how. Of course, he didn't respect mine. I never told Ted about the letter, and I don't think I ever will. I told brother number 6, though. He was furious at first, but later calmed down and said it was my choice. He said the letter wouldn't really do any harm, but it wouldn't help either. If I ever do decide to show it to Ted, it should be when he's in a stable place, maybe even in therapy, with professional support. Christmas came again, and this time I spent it with my family. My sisters are amazing. Each gave me a pair of shoes representing milestones in my life, plus one empty box for the pair I'll buy to mark a new beginning. It was the most thoughtful, emotional gift I've ever received. I cried through most of Christmas morning. On New Year's Eve, I saw Ted again. We were both invited to a mutual friend's party. We didn't plan to spend time together, but somehow kept ending up in the same group, laughing together. When midnight hit, I was sitting toward the back, away from the couples, and he came over, sat next to me, and rested his head on my shoulder. We just sat there in peaceful silence while everyone else celebrated. It felt so good, such a relief, to have my friend back. I still love him. I probably always will. I tried keeping my distance, tried not talking to him, even slept with someone else hoping it'd help me move on, but it didn't. Maybe he's my soulmate and we'll always be drawn back to each other. Or maybe it's just habit, comfort built over so many years. I don't know. But I can't stop loving him. I love the man he used to be. I love the man he is now. And honestly, I'll love whoever he becomes tomorrow and the day after that. I won't give up on him, even if I have to give up on us. I'd rather have him in my life as a friend than lose him completely. I'm always happier when he's around. I deserve to be happy, and he makes me happy. Maybe that's wrong, maybe it's foolish, but it's the truth. Everyone keeps saying that letting go was the right thing, that he did me a favor by ending things. But I miss him. Maybe that makes me stupid, but if it does, I'll gladly be a happy fool. If he ever asks me to step back, I will. But for now, I just want to live in this moment.
Story 5.
They want us to follow a dress code at school? Nope. I'll wear whatever I want. A little background for context. I've never been a fan of dress codes just for the sake of having them. So when I got into a boarding school that didn't require uniforms, I was thrilled. Honestly, I don't even hate dress codes in principle. My problem is always with how people interpret them. For example, if the rules say socks should be black or blue, 99.9% of people will assume it means navy blue. I'm the kind of person who'll show up in sky blue socks just to prove a point. Not to make trouble, but simply to share a sly grin with the handful of people who think, well, it does just say blue. It's my way of reminding the bureaucrats who wrote the rules that they aren't as airtight as they think. As my husband likes to say, I've always been a bit of a pain in the neck. I enjoy showing that either or isn't the only option. I've always dressed boldly, loved unusual combinations of fabrics and colors, and if someone had encouraged me to learn sewing back then, I probably would have become a fashion designer. But boarding school is hardly a place full of vibrant creativity. Despite being spirited, I was never a troublemaker. My mom used to describe me as a polite, well-behaved kid who could bend rules into a pretzel without ever technically breaking them. She had to word her rules very carefully whenever she left me home alone, but she also had to be cautious not to give me new ideas in the process. If someone presented a rule as unbreakable, I just had to test it. And if they were pushy or smug about it, I'd find the cleverest way possible to prove them wrong.
My mom always believed critical thinking was the real key to success in life. She taught me that if you can analyze a problem and figure out a solution, you don't need to have all the answers memorized. You just need to know how to find them. Remember, this was a decade before Google and smartphones, so I don't fault modern parents for having a different mindset. Still, I'd raise my own kids with the same philosophy if I had them. She raised me to believe success comes to people who don't just answer apple when someone asks what that round red thing on the table is. Instead, you pick it up, study its weight and texture, notice the sheen on its wax, memorize its smell, because you never know when someone will ask you to describe the underside of an apple when there isn't one around. And when you grow up thinking that way, turning school dress codes inside out becomes kind of fun. So here's the actual story. At my boarding school, we had 2 dress codes. The first was called the class dress code, and that basically meant we were expected to look like young professionals. Pretty standard stuff: skirts below fingertip length for girls, shirts and ties for boys, and all the usual details. The second set was for downtime, called city dress. That was when we hung out in the student lounge or went off campus. It was more relaxed, but still had enough restrictions to prevent the girls from wearing anything too revealing, or the boys from dressing like slobs in ripped clothes. Now, I had these suede knee-high fringe boots. Actually, I had 2 pairs, one black and one brown. They were the warmest, most comfortable boots I'd ever owned, even before Uggs became a thing. My mom and I had fought over those boots for years, so it was a huge personal victory when she let me bring them to school. One day, a teacher pulled me aside and told me that the faculty had been discussing my boots and decided they didn't fit the class dress code. But I read the rules, I argued. There's nothing in there about boots like these. I know, she admitted, but we've decided they don't fit the image we want. But the color matches, I know. The material's fine too. Suede is allowed. Yes. The rules don't mention height. Riding boots are permitted, right? That's true. So why then? I demanded. I honestly can't tell if I felt more angry or hurt. Probably both. This teacher was someone I respected, someone who had always been kind to me, and I immediately understood why they sent her to talk to me instead of someone else. Because I wasn't the type to throw a tantrum or cause a scene. I was the type to plan my revenge quietly. All right then, I said calmly, and walked away. That night, I studied the dress code rules word for word, line by line. I read through every single sentence of that dress code over and over again. I even said the rules out loud, picked up every item of clothing listed, and examined it like I was some alien who only had this manual and a piece of fabric to figure out why humans wear these things. I had to admit, it was a strict code, but they made 2 big mistakes. First, nowhere did it say where each piece of clothing had to be worn. Second, there was no mention that you even had to look presentable. The rules only specified colors and lengths: skirts below fingertip length, socks above the ankle, sleeves covering elbows, and so on. Shoes had to be in muted tones: black, brown, or other earthy shades, like my fringe boots. But nowhere did it say you couldn't show up in, say, elf shoes. Of course, elf shoes wouldn't exactly scream professional, but still, loophole. I went to bed that night mad as hell, my head buzzing with mischievous ideas. I debated with myself for a long time whether I should even go through with it, but eventually I decided if I still felt the same way in the morning, I'd start phase 1. The next day, I woke up just as annoyed, and on my way to breakfast, I mentally made a list of the biggest clowns in my class. In the cafeteria, I found a couple of them and told them, "You know, the handbook is very specific about how ties must be knotted: Windsor, single, or double. And if it's a bow tie, it has to be tied in the classic way. But nowhere does it say ties have to be worn on the neck. The rule just says they must be properly tied." I suggested that they read it carefully that evening and decide for themselves what to do with that little loophole. The following day, Ties were everywhere. On wrists, wrapped around glasses, tied across foreheads, looped around ankles, knees, thighs, even wrapped around fists like someone was stopping a nosebleed. If you could tie a Windsor knot on some body part, one of the boys in our school had done it. I was ridiculously proud of myself. Phase 1 was a total success. The teachers were irritated, of course, though plenty of students found it hilarious, until math class. One boy came in without a visible tie. He was the one who always wore a bow tie. The teacher looked down at him sternly and said, "I know you all decided to play games with ties today. I think we've been patient enough, but you do know the rules say you have to be wearing one." He grinned, looked her in the eye, and replied, "I am wearing one. You just can't see it." The room erupted in laughter. Maybe he did tie it around his ankle under his pants, or around his elbow under the blazer. Who knows? But to the rest of us, he instantly became the guy who wore his tie on his junk. By the end of the day, I was considered the legend who had found a loophole, and he was the legend who took it to, well, the most infamous possible place. The very next morning, the school email newsletter had an announcement. The rules had been updated. Ties must now be worn on the neck only. Fun times were officially over. But phase 2, oh, that was the real challenge. I'd been eyeing the most ridiculous pair of boots I'd ever seen at the mall. They were silver, with holographic rainbow circles all over, had a 5-centimeter platform, a 10-centimeter heel, and lace-up fronts that came just above the ankle. Utterly outrageous. I knew there was no way I could get away with them to class, but for city dress, I wanted them so badly. After 9 years of uniforms, I was finally starting to enjoy fashion. I'd been saving money for months and would sneak into that store whenever I could, just to look at them. For a while, I tried to convince myself they were too expensive, but once they banned my favorite suede fringe boots, my desire for those wild rainbow boots only grew stronger. Eventually, I scraped together enough money. It felt like fate. That weekend, I practically skipped to the mall, grinning from ear to ear, only to find they were sold out in my size. I nearly burst into tears, but then, right next to them, I saw the same design in black patent leather. Until that moment, I'd dismissed the black pair as boring, especially compared to the silver ones. But here's the thing. Our dress code had an entire paragraph about patent leather shoes. They were allowed, but only if worn with pants. Why? Because of that absurd old belief that shiny shoes could reflect a girl's underwear if she wore a skirt. So my rainbow boots, absolutely banned. But their black patent leather sisters with silver accents, perfectly legal. Silver detailing was allowed, since shoelace eyelets could be made of metal. And the 5-centimeter platform and 10-centimeter heel, also fine. There wasn't even a height restriction for heels in the dress code. I guess the school assumed no high school girl would willingly spend an entire day in stilettos.
And unlike the shiny rainbow boots, their black patent leather version looked less like party footwear and more like ankle boots a pixie would wear. Funny thing is, I never would have even glanced at those black boots if it weren't for my newly discovered obsession with the dress code. The outfit started with these bright orange polyester pants, covered in tiny gray-green amorphous specks, something that vaguely resembled a microscopic giraffe print. The green was barely visible. From a distance, it just looked like some random texture over the orange. The clash between the two colors was so aggressive that the pattern literally seemed to vibrate, making you dizzy and even a little nauseous if you stared too long. By sheer luck, I had also managed to grab an orange terry sweater in exactly the same shade. The result? From the waist up, I looked like a rejected Sesame Street character, while from the waist down, I resembled a disco-era misfit. Did I mention the pants were slightly flared? So on Monday, I walked into class looking like someone who'd been thrown off the set of Saturday Night Fever. My new platform boots had these heavy wooden heels that clumped so loudly they echoed through the entire building. Suddenly I was towering a good 10 centimeters over everyone else, more noticeable in the hallways, and even rivaling some teachers in terms of sheer presence. I caught a few of them throwing sideways glances at my boots, and I started keeping mental notes on which staff members apparently had it out for my suede knee-highs. It was obvious who found my appearance ridiculous. But I didn't stop there. It turned into a personal mission to curate the most hideous outfits my imagination could come up with. I didn't care how I looked anymore. I just wanted to make sure every piece still technically complied with the dress code. Even the teachers admitted my boots met the written requirements, they just didn't like them. I'd put effort into following their rules, and suddenly it wasn't good enough, simply because my choices weren't to their taste. So fine, if they didn't like my boots, I'd wear ugly boots every single day, forcing them to stare at outfits that nobody in their right mind would find appealing. And what could they do? Tell me daily that my clothes were wrong while failing to explain how? By their own admission, nothing I wore actually broke the rules, and I wasn't about to start breaking them. That's not my style. Living in a dorm had its perks. Girls shared clothes freely, so as long as you were willing to lend your stuff too, you essentially had access to 30 wardrobes, just in our block alone. My own clothes had been carefully coordinated, but once you started mixing them with other people's, the results became gloriously absurd. Like when my roommate's loud neon blouse, which she only ever wore with a black skirt, ended up paired with another girl's skirt in a clashing wild print. I wore it specifically because the colors screamed at each other. Still, not against the rules. Those scandalous slut boots, I only ever paired them with pants. I raided every thrift store, vintage shop, and secondhand place in town. And since our city had no shortage of hippies, the selection was fantastic. I put together 3-piece suits with ties that made me look so boyish that at a parent-teacher meeting, one of the teachers actually asked my mom if I was... Apparently dressing badly meant you were automatically gay. I'd braid my bangs into a thin plait, clip a heavy earring to the end so it dangled, and then swing it back and forth over my desk, or book, but only during the lessons of the teachers I suspected of discriminating against my boots. Basically, I did everything I could to annoy them with my appearance. At that infamous parent-teacher conference, they asked my mom to talk to me about my clothes. She blinked and asked if I was breaking any rules. They explained the boot situation. My mom laughed and told them there was nothing they could do. If there's one thing her daughter hated, it was being punished for a rule she didn't know existed, or worse, one that had never even been written down. If you want to make a new rule right now to stop her, go ahead, Mom said. By tomorrow, she won't be doing this anymore. I promise you won't see those boots again, but the way she'll see it, you've taken away something she liked for no good reason. That's punishment, whether you call it that or not. And when she feels punished unfairly, she punishes back. Simple as that. My advice, drop it, and spend the summer rewriting your handbook. Otherwise, you'll burn through paper trying to keep up with all the loopholes she's going to find. My daughter lives for finding loopholes. Honestly, I regret giving her so many puzzle books when she was little. Hearing this, the teachers admitted the only real reason they were ignoring my new boots was this. When the teachers saw how I reacted to the suede boots ban, some of them honestly seemed afraid to imagine what I might show up in next if they tried to outlaw the second pair as well. But being the well-behaved student that I actually was, I never wore those suede boots again. And after that, no one ever gave me grief about my outfits. Well, except for one time when my skirt ended up way too short. That one wasn't even intentional. The following year, I didn't return to that school, but for completely unrelated reasons, so I never found out if they rewrote any of their rules. To this day, though, I've kept those black boots. They're still tucked away somewhere, and every time I stumble across them at the bottom of a box, I can't help but smile. I even held onto a t-shirt from that era. It is without exaggeration the single ugliest piece of clothing I own, but I just can't throw it out. Every time I see it in my closet, I start laughing, remembering the whole saga. Somewhere I've even got photos of me in that ridiculous fuzzy orange getup. If I ever dig them out, I'll definitely share them. Back then, I was having the time of my life breaking their so-called dress code, and it felt amazing. So, here's the takeaway. Whatever problems you're facing, try flipping them inside out. Look at them from a different angle, twist them around, play with them. You never know where the cracks might be hiding. And of course, this is also just another wonderful story about how amazing my mom was. She always had my back. Though if I'm honest, I suspect she was also quietly angry that the teachers hated our boots. Because if the school rules had been clearly written, she could have been wearing them all along. Instead, those awesome boots just sat gathering dust in my locker. I miss you, Mom. Edit. No, I didn't end up becoming a lawyer. Life just went in a different direction. These days I work for myself, building a business in a field I'm genuinely passionate about. I enjoy almost every minute of it. I'm happy and I'm grateful that I get to love what I do. One last note. This whole story took place in the mid-90s.
Story 6. I ruined my ex-boyfriend's life over 20 years ago, and I just made sure it stays that way. When I was in college in the 90s, I met Jake through mutual friends. He was 23 at the time. He had already graduated and was planning to move across the country to pursue graduate school. I was also planning a move, with friends, to a city just an hour and a half away from where he was going. We had a lot in common. We fell in love, and it felt like fate. Both of us planning to move 4,000 kilometers, and almost to the same place. Jake had 2 sisters and a younger brother. They were all great people, and I got along with them right away. Since Jake was in grad school and I was working, I usually visited him on weekends. He rented a house with 2 roommates from his program. We were young, didn't have much money, but we had fun. We went on cheap dates and spent a lot of time at home. Jake bred and sold small animals. It was part of his studies. He was studying animal science, so being surrounded by animals was normal for him, and honestly, I didn't mind it. I met the wife of his academic advisor, Mary. She was around 50 and worked in the university administration. A wonderful woman. We often had lunch together when I visited. In fact, I connected with people from his program even more easily than he did. But about 2 years into the relationship, something strange happened. One day we were lying in bed at his place, partially undressed, and he suddenly said that he was bothered by the fact that I had gained weight, and that it was becoming harder for him to feel attracted to me. Not a word about health, just that he found me less attractive. I sat up and calmly replied, "Maybe you should make sure I have proper food when I visit you, instead of just crackers and cheese." I had gained maybe 4 kilograms since we met. I wore the same clothing size, and even at 23, I wasn't going to tolerate that kind of nonsense. I didn't argue. It was his problem, not mine. So I just asked, "So what's your solution?" He looked me blankly and said, "I think you should try to lose weight." I replied, "No, I'm not going to do that. So what are you going to do?" He said, "Probably nothing. I just wanted to tell you how I feel." "Great, thanks." I got dressed, went to sleep, and left the next day like usual. We kept dating. But about 3 months later, he called and said he wanted to break up after nearly 3 years together. The reason? And I quote, "You're not scientific enough." I thought, what kind of nonsense is that? He seriously claimed that he couldn't talk to me about his work without using scientific animal terminology. I said, "That's ridiculous. What's the real reason?" But he insisted that was the reason. A month later, he came to return my things, and I made him tell the truth. Eventually, he gave in. It turned out he had been seeing one of his students. Let's call her Mac. She was 19, he was 26, and he was her instructor. I exploded. I yelled at him to get out. My roommate even threatened to throw him off the 2nd floor if he didn't leave, and he left. As soon as the door closed behind him, I broke down, from rage to hysterical laughter. I had seen Mac before, and suddenly it all clicked. At a barbecue at his place once, she had spilled something on her pants. Jake asked if I could lend her a pair of sweatpants. I couldn't. I wore a size 44-46, and she was significantly bigger. And suddenly everything made sense. His comment about my weight was never about me. He just wanted me to break up with him, because he was a coward. He liked a completely different type of girl, but didn't have the courage to say it. But you know what really got to me? He said it at night, when I was 150 kilometers from home, after we had been intimate. Did he really think I would just snap, turn around, and drive home in the middle of the night? After that, I messaged his roommates. I thanked them for everything and told them we had broken up. And they already knew. They said they had demanded he tell me the truth, otherwise they would have told me themselves. That's why he came up with that nonsense about me not being scientific enough. One of the roommates, George, was a very sweet and attractive guy. He offered to bring my things over and said, "Come over this weekend. We'll have some drinks, relax." The kind of thing Jake never wanted to spend money on. I agreed. I came over. Jake wasn't home. George let me in, and that's when things got interesting. I started taking photos of all his animals because I knew one important thing. He had an animal that was on the endangered species list, and you couldn't legally keep it without a permit. All he had to do was file paperwork and pay $25, but he always said, "I don't want the government in my business." I photographed everything, the conditions, the cages, and another animal that was completely illegal to keep in that state. It was right by the window, visible from the street. Then George and I went into town. We got back around midnight, and we made sure Jake and Max saw us. Me in a short dress, a little drunk, George almost carrying me. We were loud on purpose, laughing, joking, even pretending there was something going on between us so they could hear. I spent the night in George's room. He behaved like a gentleman, but a few times walked out into the hallway just in his boxers. Pure coincidence, of course. In the morning, as I was leaving, Jake said, "You don't have to act like a..." I slowly ate a donut in a wrinkled dress with messy hair. George kissed me on the top of my head. Max sat there not knowing where to look. I smiled and said, "Enjoy my leftovers," and left. At the time, I thought that was my revenge. But no, that was just the beginning. The next day, I developed the film. Yes, the good old days. And immediately called the Department of Natural Resources. I reported everything, the animals, the conditions, the overcrowding, and especially the two that were illegal to keep in that state. I simply asked how to properly file a report, and then I did.
I destroyed my ex-boyfriend's life more than 20 years ago, and I just made sure it stays that way. As it turned out, Jake wasn't liked, not by his classmates, not even by his own roommates. But me? People liked me. George and another roommate decided to take things further. They filed a complaint with the university about a teaching assistant who was sleeping with his student and giving her preferential treatment. That same night we went bar hopping. They told the story to everyone they knew. The program was small, and the news spread fast. I made another move, too. I called Mary, his advisor's wife, and I told her directly. He admitted himself that he's sleeping with a student. I even had his emails where he confirmed it. I sent them to her. Mary was furious. She immediately passed everything to her husband, Jake's advisor. And then it all started. A couple of weeks later, George calls me, emotional. "They're here, inspectors. They're taking the animals." Mac was at home, and trying to save the situation, she said, "All the animals belong to Jake." That automatically cleared the roommates of responsibility. The inspectors knew exactly where to look. They were tipped off about the back window, where the most problematic animal was, the one that was almost never legal to keep. Since George was on the lease, he had the right to let them in. All the animals were kept in shared spaces. The inspectors worked for several hours. Then they came back with a warrant. They took all the animals and searched Jake's room. The only thing they left were a few guppies in a tank. Now, the most painful part for him. Graduate students live off grants, and he had just received a federal grant around the time we broke up. I called them,
and simply asked, "How do I report that someone with a federal grant is under investigation for illegal animal possession?" The result? He lost the grant and had to pay back nearly $30,000. He will never be able to get federal funding again. He wasn't jailed. The animals were in decent condition, but he lost all his animals, paid about $15,000 in fines. 2 animals were transferred to a wildlife center. The university didn't stay out of it either. He lost his stipend, was fired from teaching, essentially had his academic career destroyed, and all because of one thing. He was sleeping with a student. He couldn't even wait 4 weeks until the end of the course when it would have been technically allowed. His arrogance destroyed him. A few months later, I wrote to his sisters, told them I missed them. They replied and told me he had lied to the family, said I broke up with him because of distance. I just forwarded him his own email where he said he had fallen in love with Mac. And that settled everything. I moved on, finished my studies, built a career. And you know what I do now? I help scientists and doctors explain complex things in simple terms. Ironic, right? And him? He married Mac, 2 kids, went back to breeding animals. 20 years passed, and one day I'm giving a lecture at a university, 250 people in the room. And suddenly I hear, "Hey, long time no see." I turn around. It's him, Jake. I pretended I didn't recognize him. "Sorry, do I know you?" He said, "It's me, Jake." I paused and said, I guess my memory just erased you," and walked away. Later, I found out he was there for a job interview for a teaching position. They were seriously considering hiring him. And then I said just one sentence. "It's strange he's still teaching after what happened at University X." That was enough. They checked and found everything. The scandal with the student, the lost grant, the investigation, the old complaints. And you know what? He didn't get the job. Karma. Sometimes it works perfectly. And my conclusion? If the person who's supposed to love you humiliates you because of your appearance, the problem isn't you. The problem is them.